Chapter 575. Wanting to get something without paying is tantamount to a fool's dream. The risk of this rash action is great and the harvest is extremely optimistic. Once the remaining two Yonko, 4 emperors, fight, the situation of the whole world will inevitably be affected. Dustless can also take advantage of this situation and implement his plan. No matter who gets the dark fruit in the end, it doesn't matter. Find an opportunity to give it to the crew of the Bigumam pirates, and then announce the news to the world. Dustless's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he sneered with killing intent. Then announce the news to the world and push Bigumam and her pirates to the forefront. The corners of Wu Chen's mouth curled up in a playful smile as he gloated. It doesn't matter whether it can attract others or not. In short, Blackbeard, the cat that smells blood, will never watch the ultimate devil fruit that he has been pursuing for a lifetime fall into the hands of Bigumam. It's a pity? I heard that this dark fruit can devour other abilities. Taking the dark fruit handed over by Dustless, White Zetsu said regretfully, and his tone was full of melancholy. Bigumam's brain may be damaged by anger. The only thing that can devour other abilities and occupy the other's ability for its own use is the dark fruit. Devouring the enemy's ability, this is also a rule that varies from person to person. Even if Bigumam really eats the dark fruit, she can't occupy the ability of others. With his eyes shining, Dustless murmured with interest, Blackbeard can swallow other people's abilities. The biggest factor is that his body structure is alien. It is precisely because Blackbeard's body is different from ordinary people that he can accommodate other abilities. If it was someone else, they may not be able to do this. Perhaps Blackbeard knows that his body structure is special, so he happily spends his life pursuing the dark fruit. In short, as long as this news is spread, we can watch from the sidelines. Even if Blackbeard is reluctant, he must be hostile to Bigumam. This is an open conspiracy, and it's not up to him to choose. Blackbeard, who is almost obsessed with the dark fruit, even if he knows that Dustless is behind the scenes, he has to step into this trap. What can he do if he knows that this is a conspiracy? He had no choice but to crawl inside obediently. This was the highest level of crafty schemes and machinations. 5 days later, on an island in the New World, White Zetsu carried out the steps in Dustless's plan step by step, allowing the crew of the Bigumam pirates to accidentally encounter the evilest devil fruit in the world, dark fruit. It has to be said that the marine is depraved, but compared to the ugly pirates, the plot is much more noble. At least they won't do such a crazy thing as killing their companions. After accidentally discovering the devil fruit, the first thing these loyal subordinates of Bigumam thought of was not to tell Bigumam about the boss. Instead, several crew members with evil intentions silenced their companions. He intended to take the devil fruit for himself. It is reasonable to have evil intentions. The devil fruit illustration handbook recorded that this dark fruit is the evilest fruit in history. How can such an introduction be an ordinary thing? This sudden change was also beyond Dustless's expectations. Although this was the case, it was also what he wanted. Because of this, it was more confirmed that this was the dark fruit, so that some people with ulterior motives would think that this was hearsay. Because of the uneven distribution of the loot, it caused the crew to kill each other. This kind of thing happened everywhere. The episode of killing between the crew added a lot of suspense. The devil fruit that can cause the crew of the Yonko, 4 emperors, to kill each other must not be ordinary. This also confirmed the identity of the dark fruit. Secretly, Dustless used the huge privileges of the Tenryubito to add fuel to the fire. In just less than a day, this news that should have been limited to the Bigumam pirates swept across the New World like a hurricane. Enough to destroy the New World, the strongest dark fruit in the world appeared in the Bigumam pirates, and it was accompanied by several undeniable photos. Such shocking news appeared in newspapers all over the world the next day, and it became known to the world at an incredible speed. Among them, the most shocked was Bigumam, one of the Yonko, 4 emperors. To be honest, it was just a devil fruit. Although it was powerful beyond imagination, Bigumam didn't care much because she was already an ability user, and the devil fruit was useless. What made it most difficult for her to accept was that the people who killed the crew were the few people she trusted the most, and they secretly did such a dirty thing behind her back. It was unforgivable. Those who tried to take the dark fruit were melted by her inhumane use of gastric juice. Bigumam also knew the temptation of the dark fruit. It was definitely not worse than Whitebeard's tremor fruit, Gura no Mi. However, the name of the Bigumam pirates was enough to stop those pirates. Although there were some who came to ask for the dark fruit, it was best to be mercilessly dismembered. "Bastard of all people, why did you have to go to that old hag?" The night sky was particularly quiet, and the tall Blackbeard roared angrily. His eyes were fixed on the devil fruit on the screen. He could be 100% sure that this was the legendary dark fruit. Thinking of Baigu Mamu's terrifying strength, Blackbeard broke out in a cold sweat. His heart was filled with fear. Unlike the heroic great pirates, Blackbeard had a huge disadvantage, or it could be said that his character was flawed. Whether it was Hundred Beast Kaido, red-haired Shanks, or Whitebeard, they all turned a deaf ear to life in the battle and held the mentality of fighting with their lives. Only Blackbeard was afraid of death. Of course, this is also human nature. It shows that compared to other pirates, Blackbeard is more cunning and realistic. He considers his life in everything. If his life is gone, what's the use of getting the dark fruit? The cautious Blackbeard naturally wouldn't be an idiot to fight Big Umam alone. Even so, he was content to be a small soldier under Whitebeard, abandoning his dignity and glory to be an ordinary crew member, abandoning the fame and fortune that pirates value the most, and living in obscurity for decades. In addition, Blackbeard was extremely greedy for life and afraid of death. Every time he schemed, he would bear the brunt of it. What he valued the most was his own life. Compared to those who risked their lives for another and viewed life as a feather, Blackbeard was far inferior. This was his bad habit, but it was also Blackbeard's biggest advantage. It was because he was greedy for life and afraid of death that he was able to display what he had learned and plan all his plans to the point that they were flawless. This was the only way to ensure the safety of his little life. That is to say, Blackbeard is waiting for the best moment? White Zetsu said. Dustless heard the words and nodded slightly. The probability of Blackbeard making a move is 0 if he is not 100% sure. What is 100% absolute certainty? At least he can save his own life, otherwise, it would be useless to get the dark fruit. Then again. Staring at White Zetsu, Dustless suddenly turned around. After a little thought, he asked directly, "What is the recent movement of Doflamingo?" Although the current main plan is to stir up trouble with Bigu's mom and Whitebeard, the trace of the clown Doflamingo is also very important. Dustless also needs his Dressrosa to build Pluton. This, White Zetsu's face changed slightly and he was suddenly speechless. He looked at Dustless with a little timidity. Witnessing the cold, emotionless, machine-like Dustless, his scalp couldn't help but tingle. Doflamingo used birdcage on Dressrosa. The outside world has no way to know the specifics, but according to the raging flames in the town and the scene of blood flowing like a river. At this point, White Zetsu's tone stopped. The meaning behind it was self-evident. Dressrosa was now like a second world isolated from the rest of the world. As for the specifics, only the initiator, Doflamingo, and the heavens knew. In short, there is no need to think about it. Dressrosa is definitely bleeding like a river now. That kid, his strength is average but he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. After a moment of silence, Dustless said with ridicule and disdain. According to Dustless's speculation and his strange movements a while ago, it is estimated that Doflamingo is preparing for the artificial devil fruit in advance. Early the next morning, the sky in the distance turned white, the sun rose high, and the fiery red morning sun dotted the whole world. The warm feeling made people lazy and couldn't help but want to go back to sleep. On the ship, Blackbeard did not sleep for the entire night. Even so, he was still full of energy. His eyes were shining with awe-inspiring luster. There was an indescribable sense of confidence and ruthlessness between his eyebrows. It was the complete opposite of his usual introverted aura. Blackbeard narrowed his eyes. He was as cunning as a rat. The gaze that shot out from the slits of his eyes was exceptionally vicious. It was as if he was choosing to devour someone. His cold lips were raised high. Even though he concealed his smile very well, one could still see the curve of his lips. After a night, he had already thought of countermeasures to deal with it. It is definitely not possible to fight alone. He can only fool the Whitebeard pirates to fight together. Whitebeard is very rational and smart, but it does not mean that the IQ of his crew is unfathomable. His bitter and pained face was 10 times uglier than the death of his father. "What do you mean?" Being suddenly asked by Blackbeard, Thatch's face was full of confusion. Obviously he didn't realize what Blackbeard meant. He just puzzled. "Although my father's body is getting worse year by year, he can live for another 10 or 20 years without any problem. Whitebeard's physique is extraordinary and he is beyond normal human beings. After becoming one of the Yonko, 4 emperors, the number of people who dare to provoke Whitebeard has gradually decreased. Recently, Whitebeard has rarely made a move and has a lot of time to rest. You are talking about a natural situation without the interference of external factors, but for example, with a sly smile in his eyes, Blackbeard raised his voice and said, "The world has not been calm recently. No one dares to provoke the Whitebeard pirates because of my father's name. But as you said, my father's body is getting worse year by year. One day he will be dragged down. At that time, other pirates will dismember us." Blackbeard pretended to be anxious and worried, looking like he was worried about the country and the people. This scared Sir into a daze. This is indeed a major problem, but there is no need to worry about it. Thatch obviously heard the meaning of alarmism, but he didn't doubt Blackbeard. The idea of the Whitebeard pirates' crew being a family has been deeply ingrained in his mind. It is impossible for him to doubt his brother. He didn't expect Blackbeard to be more insidious in his calculations. That is also a matter of more than 10 years later. There is no need to worry about it now. By then, we will be able to support one side of the sky. Thatch said confidently as the haze was swept away. "You are such a half-baked person? There will be no stage for a vassal like you in the future." His heart was full of contempt and disdain. He sneered at Thatch's confidence, but on the surface he was very heavy. That was before. Now the situation has changed. After a pause, Blackbeard said, "The appearance of the dark fruit is bound to increase the strength of the Biguman pirates in a short period of time. Maybe soon there will be one more powerful battle power. You know what it means. Although we have no direct conflict with the Biguman pirates, no one will care about their territory." Thatch's expression solidified and he nodded thoughtfully. This is indeed a big problem. The sudden appearance of the dark fruit will increase the strength of the Biguman pirates. Although there is no direct conflict, the Yonko, 4 emperors, are all potential competitors, which is known to all. "I've had enough of the fish." Looking at Thatch vaguely, Blackbeard smiled. It was not difficult to see from his expression that Thatch's heart was shaken. When he was about to add fuel to the fire, his back suddenly felt cold. Strange, he turned his head around strangely, his eyes emitting a dim light. Combined with his rough and ferocious face, he looked particularly frightening. His eyes stared at the dense forest on the island. He suddenly felt a pair of eyes spying on him. Chapter 578. Blackbeard's brows furrowed tightly together. Even though it was just his intuition, he was a suspicious person by nature. The sudden appearance of this strange feeling made him extremely uncomfortable. It was extremely difficult for him to ignore it and pretend that nothing had happened. Maybe it's really my illusion. His observation hockey spread, and after a careful perception, he noticed that there was no one around. It was dead silent. Only occasionally there were a few solitary birds passing by. Blackbeard's suspicious heart was quiet. He turned his head and continued to talk to Surt about the perfect plan to save his father from the fire and water. "Is that man Blackbeard? I thought that dustless Sama was exaggerating about him. I didn't expect this guy to be so unfathomable. His strength is different from what he showed on the surface." White Zetsu in the depths of the ground was stunned. About half an hour later he realized that Blackbeard's ship had left. He came out of the ground and sucked in the fresh air of the outside world, trying to calm himself down. White Zetsu's heart was pounding wildly. Once Blackbeard locked onto him, White Zetsu was 100% sure that he would be killed or killed. Blackbeard was not a good person. But it seems that dustless Sama's strategy seems to have succeeded. Staring at the battleship in the distance, Baiju raised his eyebrows and sneered. The master who created him was Wu Chen. He understood Wu Chen's means better than ordinary people. Being unable to live or die was just the beginning. Each person who looked down on Dustless all had abnormally miserable endings. No, this idea is really idiotic. How could this group of clowns who were casually played with know that the person behind the scenes was Dustless Sama? White Zetsu smiled bitterly at himself. The world regarded this as an accidental accident. Sending out the strongest fruit with the title of history's evilest, the dark fruit, calmly as bait, there is no such person who can have such a temperament. To some extent, this possibility does not exist. There is no absolute in the world, no perfect plan. Any plan designed by people always has unknown flaws. If it is eaten by others, the loss is not worth the gain. In fact, Dustless was willing to give away the dark fruit. He was able to let it go and never cared about the gains and losses of the devil fruit. Even if he was eaten, it wouldn't change anything. Time flew by. Unknowingly, several days had passed. Time was precious when you cared about it, but when you ignored it, it became worthless. He completely ignored the concept of time, and everything passed extremely quickly. War is cruel and ever-changing. The Bigumam pirates got the news of the dark fruit. Due to Dustless's reclusion behind the scenes at first, it was just pirates from the New World. As time passed, some pirates from the Four Seas also heard the news. Bigumam is terrible, but there are some evil people who are not afraid of death, and then they provoke the Bigumam pirates 3 times in a row, trying to get the favor of the goddess of luck. Of course, they still receive the grim smile of the Grim Reaper in the end. This group of people is the main force of this battle. In the dark ice cellar, there were coffins placed neatly, which was used by Dustless to store the corpses, including the corpses of the previous Hokage. They were responsible for the main combat mission this time. Summoning Jutsu, Edo Tensei. As Dustless shouted, the unmoving coffin on the ground suddenly lifted up. Then the entire surface of the coffin burst open, revealing a few familiar cold faces. Then after a few seconds they all opened their eyes. Whis, whis, whis. Several sharp sounds broke through the air in succession. In the darkness where you couldn't see your own fingers, you could vaguely see a few hazy black shadows pouncing on Wu Qin from all directions. Their hands were shining with cold light, and they were obviously holding sharp weapons. As expected, keeping your consciousness was the wrong choice. Although a pure killing machine is cruel, it is very suitable for old antiques like you. His left eye suddenly turned into Rinnegan, and the calm corner of his clothes was blown up, followed by an invisible repulsive force that was unstoppable. Shinra Tensei. Bang bang bang, several shadows were forced back in the blink of an eye, and their bodies were ruthlessly scattered. Their faces came into view. They were the previous Hokage led by Hashirama. Even with the immortal body, it is easy to kill you. You don't want to die again. Dustless's eyes were as calm as stagnant water, and he looked indifferently at the people who were knocked down. His emotionless expression and cold voice coincided with the cold killing machine. Have you ever seen a Hokage compromise with the enemy? Uchiha Dustless. An old but full of energy roared. It was the Sandaime Hokage who was glaring at them. The other Hokages were silent, their eyes were cold as they stared at Wu Qin, silently expressing their position. In that case, I can only deprive you of your consciousness. Although your combat power will decrease, it doesn't matter, the immortal body is enough to make up for the decrease in strength. With a strange smile, the originally expressive faces of the Hokage instantly became pale and indifferent, and their eyes were replaced by emptiness. In an instant, Dustless brutally deprived them of their consciousness. Originally, for the sake of Tsunade's face, I could reluctantly let you go once and keep your own consciousness. You don't know what's good for you, so you can only blame yourself for this. Dustless glanced at them indifferently. These so-called Hokage are still stubborn, and now things have changed and time and space have changed, and the deep-rooted ideas in their hearts seem to be affecting their reason. There was no market for the will of fire in the past. Now in this world there was similarly no market. But to Dustless, these few super powerhouses were all divine weapons used to kill in the dark. It doesn't matter if their strength decreases, the immortal body is enough to make up for the deficiency. In this world no one knows the truth-seeking ball. Chapter 579. Pursing his lips, Wu Qin was disdainful of these old fogies in front of him. They were always talking about unity and guarding the future, but they have always been singing a one-man show. In the past no one cared about them. The situation in this world is more complicated and changeable. Their saintly mentality will only make them a laughingstock. Ninjas are very ugly, but they are slightly inferior to pirates. Pirates have no morality. One second they can call each other brothers and the next second they can fight against each other. Time passed quickly and 7 days passed in a blink of an eye. Because of Dustless's interference, the whole world was full of gunpowder, so almost all the pirates stared at the movements of the Bigumamu pirates and became the target of public criticism in an instant. During this period it is worth mentioning that Thatch, the captain of the 4th Division under Whitebeard, came to secretly steal the dark fruit. He was easily defeated by Bigumamu and tore off an arm of the other party. Even Blackbeard was beaten to a pulp. Whitebeard knew that he went berserk on the spot and led the entire Whitebeard pirates to invade. He fought with the Bigumamu pirates for a day and gained the upper hand. Now Whitebeard is only in his 60s. Although his body has begun to decline, he is still in the golden age of his peak and can be said to be invincible. As one of the Yonko 4 emperors, Bigumamu is obviously inferior to Whitebeard. Using the powerful ability of Tremor Fruit, Gura Gura no Mi, and showing the power to destroy the world, he easily destroyed the island where Bigumamu was entrenched and temporarily repelled the Bigumamu pirates. Damn, someone must have plotted against me, damn dark fruit. Countless blood vessels spread in her eyes, and Bigumamu roared angrily, venting her inner depression and indignation. Looking at her, her body was not inferior to the giant clan. Her body was covered with blood, and even some parts had traces of depression. These were all thanks to Whitebeard. This is too strange. It must be some bastard who plotted against me. If I don't break your bones and scatter your ashes, I can't vent the hatred in my heart. Bigumamu gasped and roared in a low voice, no different from a hysterical beast. At first, Big Mama didn't think much of it, but later, as more and more pirates challenged her, she suddenly realized that something was wrong. The Biguman pirates are powerful enough to destroy the world, but if they are targeted by the whole world, they will die. It is obvious that someone is plotting against her and she has become the target of the whole world. Bang! He angrily threw the metal box containing the dark fruit away, and a dent was formed on the deck of the battleship. As if he was still angry, he stomped on it a few times. Bigumamu's heart felt stifled. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many people around, she would have given herself a slap. Her whole body was trembling with anger, and her eyes were about to pop out. This was not the strongest devil fruit that could increase the fleet's strength, but a well-deserved death curse. It won't take long for the Biguman pirates to be wiped out by the whole world. Boom boom boom. The dizzying roar suddenly came, and the surrounding sea shook violently. Bigumamu, who was caught off guard, was splashed with water stains all over her body. The cold sea water was biting and cold. Instead of extinguishing the fire in Bigumamu's heart, the fire became bigger and bigger, burning her reason. Marine? A group of shameless villains, still as despicable as ever. There is a bottom line for looking down on people. Yonko for emperors? Is Yonko for emperors? Unless the two old things Garp and Sengoku come in person. Bigumamu sneered again and again, and the two characters, Garp and Sengoku, came to her and gave her a headache. After all, both of them had fought with Roger, and their strength was almost deified. In fact, Bigumamu was not afraid of Garp and Sengoku, but that was before. She had fought with Whitebeard for nearly a day and suffered a lot of injuries. She had no energy to deal with peerless powerhouses like Sengoku and Garp. If other people come, they will die. Even if an admiral comes, Bigumamu will dare to fight, not to mention that Marine Admiral is in a miserable state. Mom, the Marine is here. A group of embarrassed younger brothers ran over and attached themselves to Bigumamu, tired of dealing with them. Their expressions were decadent, and their exhausted appearance was obviously mentally and physically exhausted. These days they have fought against many opponents, and their energy has long been squandered. Bigumamu's eyes narrowed, and the expressions of these people were all in her eyes. On the surface she was unmoved, but in fact she was secretly worried. Once the people's hearts were scattered, her pirates were about to come to an end. It seems that it is necessary to win a battle to restore confidence. Staring at the marine fleet in the distance, Bigumamu intended to kill the chicken to warn the monkey. When she was about to send the pirates over, a sentence from her subordinates abruptly broke her dream. Garp, that old thing, personally led the team, followed by a young man. According to the outline, it is very similar to the honorary admiral in the marine newspaper last time. The merciless words made Bigumamu's face red and her neck thick. She held back her words for a long time and took them back. An admiral in Garp, I am afraid that it is likely to be her. After days of hard fighting, it is not suitable to fight again, quickly retreat. Bigumamu showed an expression of sympathy for her subordinates, but her expression was extremely ugly, and she was more sad than eating 10 pounds of flies. The crew didn't talk nonsense when they heard this, and they drove the ships at full power to avoid the Marines' shelling. The energy of people has a limit, and they have reached the bottleneck. How could it be that kid? With the excellent vision of the telescope, Baigu's mom saw Wu Qin standing side by side with Garp at a glance. She immediately widened her eyes and said incredulously. At the same time, she didn't forget to reprimand her subordinates. Increase the speed of navigation. Who dares to slack off, I will throw him into the sea to fill the stomach of the Sea King. Bigumamu's old face twitched and she cursed her bad luck. Dustless's strength was enough to fight the Yonko, 4 emperors, and even suppress the strength of the Yonko, 4 emperors. Once such a person joins forces with Garp, I am afraid that in the future, there will be a big pirate named Baigu Mamu. P.S. Baigu Mamu's men did call her mother, which sounds disgusting but the truth. Chapter 580. Boom boom boom, monstrous waves were set off around the fleet, and the sea water of more than 10 meters almost swallowed the Baigu Mamu pirates. The sea water had wet Baigu Mamu's bulky coat. Nevertheless, her forehead was sweating uncontrollably. For the first time in her life she showed a fearful expression. Now she was already bruised and Garp was enough for her to drink a pot. Dustless was added. Thinking about it, Baigu Mamu couldn't help but feel a chill, and her body uncontrollably retreated. Big bandits like Baigu's mom were not afraid of death, but if the enemy was an invincible existence, then they would be an idiot to recklessly face it head-on. Of the 36 stratagems, escape is the best stratagem, which is vividly reflected in the hands of pirates. Although her teeth were itching with anger, Baigu Mamu had to admit that going against the current would only lead to her own destruction, and she had to escape. This is the way to survive. Where there is life there is hope. Let's wait and see. Through the sight of the telescope, she glanced fiercely at the Marines, and with the most vicious language in her life, she did not hesitate to curse the attacking Marines. Well, what's with that guy's eyes? Her eyes suddenly fell on Dustless and Baigu Mamu was surprised. Dustless seemed to be aware of Baigu Mamu's spying, and he raised the corners of his mouth with a bright smile. He looked quite approachable, and his smile was like a warm spring breeze in March, which was refreshing. However, Baigu Mamu's eyes were full of different meanings. Contempt, ridicule. In short, Baigu Mamu's eyes were laughing at her powerlessness. Dustless's light and elegant smile was the embodiment of her powerlessness. It was precisely because she couldn't threaten Wu Chen with her strength that the latter had such a relaxed expression. He was quietly contemptuous and didn't need any words to modify it. The calmer Dustless was, the more it was an insult to Baigu Mamu, a naked contempt. In the dark, Baigu Mamu saw Dustless's unscrupulous ridicule, and her eyes were about to burst. Mamu, the crew members looked at Baigu Mamu in fear. In a trance, they even saw the miserable appearance of Baigu Mamu, and subconsciously took a step back. Baigu Man pirates, Captain Charlotte Lingling, bounty of one of the Yonko 4 emperors. In the second half of the New World, the crew called her Mother. When she was young, Dustless looked at the information about Baigu's mom in his hand. It was all sent by the Navy. It was just simple basic information. For Dustless, as an honorary admiral, it was just a small matter. Dustless had a strange expression on his face when he saw the word, Mother. It seems like you have the same idea as this old man. Seeing Dustless's strange expression, Garp's face was full of wretchedness, and his strange laughter made people speechless and tangled. He patted Dustless's shoulder quite familiarly, and then leaned close to Dustless's ear. When he looked around and no one was around, Garp's face changed into a gossipy expression. Whitebeard's crew called him Father, and Baigu Mamu's crew called him Mother. Both of them belong to the giant clan, and they are also one of the Yonko 4 emperors. Do you think they hooked up with each other when they were young? Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Garp asked with a smirk on his face. Occasionally, his eyes would sparkle in agreement. Isn't there a saying that goes, if you are fated to meet each other, even if you are 1,000 miles away? They must have something going on between them. They are a perfect match. Dustless's forehead was filled with countless black lines, and the corner of his mouth was twitching. He stared at Garp with both anger and amusement. He wanted to refute, but he couldn't refute it. Although he knew that this was Garp's nonsense, it was indeed a coincidence that made people speechless. That old man might still be. Seeing that Garp was still talking nonsense, Dustless simply turned around and left. The navy cloak behind him was also bulging. He was quite uncomfortable with this outfit. Although uncomfortable, he still chose to do as the Romans do. He always felt that in the name of justice, doing shady business was more suitable for him. Where is the next sailing route? Baigu's mom is already a drowning dog. Dustless stopped and looked straight at Garp. He was an honorary admiral and had no power. Of course he was too lazy to take care of it. Everything fell on Garp's head. There is no need to pursue Yonko 4 emperors. The desperate beast is more ferocious than usual. If you can defeat her, you can just take back the islands occupied by her. Garp said in a depressed whisper, looking at the back of Baigu's mom. He clenched his fists. Even if he was unwilling, he couldn't help it. A skinny camel is bigger than a horse. What's more, there are Whitebeard pirates around. If they suddenly burst out and take a bite, the consequences would be unimaginable. Especially after the previous fight with the Whitebeard pirates, the Bigu's mom pirates were greatly damaged. At least in the next few years she won't be able to make waves again. Do as you wish. Glancing faintly, Dustless knew that there was a deeper meaning. In addition, there is also the biggest factor. After destroying a Yonko 4 emperors, not only will there be no benefits, but bad things will come out one after another. The islands ruled by Bigu's mom will first suffer, and pirates will begin to fight for territory and kill each other. The balance of the three major forces will also be broken, and the whole world will fall into a state of rage and loss of control. This old man said a lot. It's estimated that he doesn't have the confidence to kill Bigu's mom. This is interesting. Looking at the faintly unwilling Vice Admiral Garp, Dustless smiled, and at the same time, he was a little curious about Bigu's mom. There is no doubt that Yonko 4 emperors are peerless powerhouses. Although Garp is strong enough, the other party is the elite of the entire Bigu's mom pirates. Maybe Roger, the Pirate King, will be defeated. Chapter 581. The black ink spots in the distance gradually disappeared from the sea forever. The encounter with the Bigumam pirates was just a small interlude in the middle. On the island once occupied by the Yonko 4 emperors, the island affiliated with Bigumam, countless coffins rose from the ground, and the dead walked out with dull eyes and a smell of decay. These people were given life again, flexibly manipulating their limbs, slaughtering the remaining pirates on the island, and those never-before-seen ninjutsu were overwhelming. Water attribute, fire attribute, earth attribute, all kinds of stunning moves appeared on the stage. Killing and arson in the name of justice is much more interesting than leisurely Mariehua doing nothing all day. With a strange smile on his cheeks, Dustless disappeared in an instant and turned into a golden beam of light, directly locking the pirates in front of him. Light speed kick. Boom boom boom. The moment the voice fell, the locked black shadow was hit by the golden light, and the super-large building in the distance disappeared together with it, turning into a pile of rubble. Even the trace of the corpse was not left. At the moment of the explosion, it had been annihilated into nothingness. What kind of ability does this guy have? It's almost the same as Kizaru's fruit. After killing the attacking pirate, Garp's eyes fell on Dustless's calf with photon remnants. The moves and abilities used were almost the same. Even so, Garp didn't doubt that it was the same fruit. It was impossible for this to happen, it was just a division of similar abilities. In the same era, devil fruit with the same ability does not exist, this is known to the world. The whole scene was bloody and violent, there were charred limbs and broken arms everywhere, the ground was burned black by some kind of blazing force and the screams were endless. Compared with the cold and ruthless Dustless, Garp was a person with a conscience. Those who could be captured alive were all captured alive, and those who dared to resist were just knocked out. On the other hand, Dustless's Kusanagi cloud sword, condensed from photons, cut iron like mud, and the pirates who were cut were all brutally dismembered. Executioners who commit crimes in the name of justice, stop immediately. An enraged voice came from behind, containing a monstrous killing intent that wished to tear Dustless to shreds. One could even hear the ear-piercing sound of teeth grinding due to excessive hatred. The pirates' brains don't seem to be very bright. They might be able to escape if they hide. Jumping out like a clown, do they think they are the saviors of the world? Sensationalism. Without even turning his head, Dustless's mocking voice resounded in the boundless void. Then he disappeared from where he stood. Damn it, where did you go? The sound of astonishment exploded, and the pupils were full of dullness. The figure in front of them suddenly disappeared like a ghost, and the observation hockey couldn't perceive the location. It was hard not to be surprised. Boom boom boom. He suddenly felt a sharp pain in his back as an unprecedented power fell from the sky. His standing body was instantly crushed by this valiant and unparalleled power. The ground sank like a swamp as he was mercilessly trampled into the ground in an instant. Ka ka ka. The corner of his mouth vomited blood uncontrollably, and then he struggled desperately, but the small foot on his back was no different from a mountain weighing dozens of tons. No matter how fierce the resistance was, it couldn't splash a ripple, and no matter how powerful the force was, it couldn't shake the tender calf. Along with his dignity, it was trampled to nothing. His body was like a willow fluttering in the wind, this was the only thing that touched his mind. A strange emotion spread from the bottom of his heart. In an instant he felt like a tiny grain of sand. No one would care if he died or not. In this way, do you still think you can save the world? Do you realize how fragile and powerless you are? Spitting out an indifferent accent that did not belong to a human, Wu Chen's emotionless gaze was like looking down at a powerless insect, his cold pupils splashed with faint ripples. Has the mastery of armament hockey reached a small achievement? You have some skills. The texture under his feet was no different from falling on steel, and there was an essential difference between it and the flexible back of human beings. Looking closely, Dustless suddenly felt that the struggling side of the face was familiar, and he seemed to have seen it before. Captain Thatch, we're coming to save you. Suddenly there was a slight tremor on the ground. When he looked up, the scene reflected in his pupils was a dense group of pirates. They were holding all kinds of weapons, and they were charging towards him with a majestic momentum. Dustless's eyes narrowed slightly and he looked at the dusty face. Perhaps because his left arm was broken, he didn't recognize Thatch's identity for a while. It turned out to be the Whitebeard Pirates' 4th Division captain. Thatch, no wonder you have this confidence. At this moment, Thatch was in a mess, his left arm had been torn, his eyes were full of filth, and even though his face was full of dust, it still couldn't hide his pale face. Since you are here, Marshal D. Titch, nicknamed Blackbeard, may also be on this island. With a cold face, Dustless looked straight at the pirates roaring in front of him. His pupils flashed with a rare pity, and the Kusanagi sword condensed from photons in his hand instantly collapsed. Ignorance is fearless, it's used to describe your group. The white jade-like hand condensed a large number of photons, like a bottomless black hole, frantically swallowing and absorbing the photons around, condensing into a dazzling flash. Yasukani no Magatama. Thousands of golden flashes flashed out, and the gorgeous light played a cruel scene. Dozens of pirates attacked, their bodies had hundreds of burn holes out of thin air, and they fell to the ground with an unwilling face. Although they were already dead, their gray pupils were full of fear. Unlike Garp, Dustless only pursued 2 policies when dealing with enemies. The first was to completely control them and the second was to completely destroy them. Chapter 582. Seeing that Dustless's methods were so bloody and cruel, as if the people he slaughtered were just a bunch of insignificant insects, Dustless's dark gem-like eyes remained calm. His whole body was filled with an aura of isolation. Serd couldn't help but feel at a loss. He didn't see the shadow of a human in Dustless. He didn't feel sad or happy about things. His clear eyes only had an unchanging indifference. Witnessing his former companions being brutally beaten into sieves, Serd's hatred for Dustless increased. In the blink of an eye, his whole face and neck turned red. He turned his head and glared at Dustless. His eyes were scarlet like a dying beast. There was only soul-deep hatred in his eyes. Blackbeard? You mean Titch, right? Sorry to disappoint you. I've already asked him to meet up with my father in advance. Staring at Dustless with a sneer, Serd smiled proudly. He didn't hide the sarcasm in his words. It seemed that only in this way could his devastated heart feel better. Serd was sizing up Wu Chen without leaving a trace. He hoped to see his disappointment, but unfortunately his wish was destined to fail. His face was always expressionless. He maintained an indifferent look. His frozen expression was indifferent. He was neither happy nor angry. His indifferent look had an invisible contempt for everything. You're the stupidest person in the world. You were betrayed by your own people, but you still helped him count the money and sacrificed your life to protect him. You're so considerate of others. I've lost. Dustless lowered his head and sighed. Serd's face turned pale and his breathing became heavy. He wanted to see Dustless's painful expression. He didn't want to see Dustless speak to him with such a pitiful look and a sympathetic tone. For a moment he felt like a clown abandoned by the whole world. Quietly sizing up Serd at his feet, Dustless' tone didn't have any intention of ridicule. There was only pure sympathy. Serd was fooled by Blackbeard to the point of confusion and even protected him to the point of death. Dustless couldn't help but admire Blackbeard's methods. In the future he was able to stabilize as one of the 4 emperors, obtain the dark fruit, and take away Whitebeard's tremor fruit. Whether it was accidental or inevitable, it proved that Blackbeard was extraordinary. A true wise man did not rely on absolute strength to conquer the world and control the world behind the scenes. Instead, he used his weak strength to make the entire world go round and round. Countless experts were at his fingertips, playing their roles according to the script he had arranged in advance. Only then could he be called a wise man. Blackbeard is such a person. Although his strength is not as good as Bigumamu and Whitebeard for the time being, He can provoke a war between the two pirate regiments with his wisdom. The same was true during the War of the Best in later generations. The real winner was not the Marine headquarters that suffered heavy losses, nor the Whitebeard pirates that Whitebeard died, but Blackbeard, who gained both fame and fortune. You still don't understand. You are just a clown being played by Blackbeard. All of this is a drama directed and written by him. His goal is to provoke a war between Whitebeard and Bigu's mom and take the opportunity to seize the dark fruit. Dustless' magnetic voice was full of wisdom as he said faintly, "The onlooker sees everything clearly." It was precisely because he was not involved that he could take a more rational approach and pry into the secrets behind the scenes. "Nonsense, Titch is easygoing. He can't be the kind of person you said. He has been in the Whitebeard pirates for more than 10 years. Don't tell me his purpose is the so-called dark fruit." Surd screamed hysterically, denying everything Dustless said. "Why deceive yourself? If Blackbeard didn't instigate you to secretly steal the dark fruit, none of this would have happened," Dustless explained softly. There was only simple pity and sympathy in his tone. He sympathized with Surd's ignorance and ridiculous ideas, his narrow vision and his ignorance of people's hearts. The most ridiculous thing is that Surd still defended Blackbeard even after being cheated by him. This kind of tragic character also made Dustless's dusty heart loosen. He wanted to ridicule Surd, but he couldn't. In short, Dustless lost to such a strange character. Dustless's ridicule is at least a person like Whitebeard. Surd is not qualified. "You can go." Dustless glanced at him faintly, and his eyes flashed with a strange light. The golden calf that stepped on Surd's body was also taken back, leaving Surd with a stunned face. "Bastard, I don't even have the qualifications to be killed by you, right?" Standing up and glaring at Dustless, Surd roared furiously. The burning flames burned his reason. If he didn't realize the huge gap between them, he would definitely kill Dustless at all costs. However, even if he fought with his life, he still couldn't shake Wu Qin. Wu Qin was so close, yet it was like the ends of the earth. His hand simply couldn't touch Wu Qin, and it was also impossible to touch his shadow. "Do you think you are qualified?" Dustless turned his head, revealing half of his face, and asked. She breathed out cold air and glanced at him expressionlessly. Her cold eyes were as quiet as stagnant water at the bottom of a beach. She glanced at him deeply and then strolled away. Her leisurely pace was like a stroll after dinner. About half an hour later, Dustless came to the Marine battleship. "You are cruel enough. He has been driven crazy by you. You killed him with your own hands. You let him go on purpose," Garp said helplessly as he leaned against the Marine battleship on the coast. He stared at the indifferent Dustless, his mouth moved but he still closed his mouth. Dustless's strength is not weaker than his, and his military rank is higher than his. He is also a supreme celestial dragon, and his forces are all over the world. It's not Garp's turn to say anything. "Cruel? I feel that this is a different kind of release. It's also a way to make use of trash and squeeze out his last bit of value. It's to let Surd recognize reality and walk towards heaven without regrets. I feel that I'm very kind, Lieutenant General Garp. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival, everyone." Chapter 583. When Black Death said this, Dustless was curious and his eyes were filled with surprise. Does this guy still have a strong move? The time was a little strange, but then he felt a familiar aura which made him frown. His eyes narrowed slightly and he took a deep breath. He was even more curious. At this moment, Black Death put his hand on the hilt, and at the same time took a deep breath, and the extremely curved sword was instantly unsheathed. In the blink of an eye, a ray of cold light shot towards Wu Qin. At this time, after seeing the biting cold light, Dustless couldn't help but be startled, but then he coldly snorted and suddenly jumped up. Taking a deep breath, a cold murderous aura appeared in his eyes. In that instant, a ray of light shot out. Immediately, an azure saber energy flew out from his body and collided with the saber energy. Everyone's eyes were filled with surprise. At this time, Dustless didn't have the intention to be polite at all, and he instantly opened the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. At this time his body was covered with a blue light, and that was Kansusanu. He coldly snorted and slowly looked at the person in front of him and said, "Just by you? Although your strength isn't bad, it doesn't seem to be enough. Why don't you try another move?" At this moment Black Death's face was filled with anger and he coldly said, "Is that so? Let's try this." Kansusanu was only in a half-body state. It didn't directly enter the final state. Black Death Mao was not polite at all. He coldly jumped up and his speed was incomparably fast. He immediately drew a terrifying ray of light with his extremely curved saber, jumped into the air and his body slightly rotated. Then he suddenly slashed down with all his might. Dustless saw the sword coming towards him, but he didn't move and just stood there, and at the same time he immediately raised the shield in his hand. The moment Kinsusanu raised the shield, it directly blocked all the dark energy on the sword, and all the dark energy was completely blocked in an instant. Dustless's expression became colder, and his eyes showed a bit of disdain, and he said with a faint sneer, "This kind of power can't do anything to me, it seems that you've reached the end, right?" When he said this there was a hint of mockery in his voice. At this moment after hearing this sentence, Black Death immediately became angrier, and he took a deep breath and his eyes slightly narrowed. What did you say?" Just as he said this, Wu Qin flew back and at the same time he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Fire release, grand fire annihilation. A huge flame suddenly spewed out from his mouth, and when the terrifying flame sprayed out from his mouth, it directly hit the opponent in front of him. Mao Black Death was shocked when he saw the incomparably huge flame spraying towards him. He sucked in a breath of cold air. The temperature of the flame made him shudder. It was a world of difference from before. Just now it was only 1,000 degrees, but now it had turned white. The pure white flame has reached more than 10,000 degrees. At this time he couldn't help but be shocked, but at this moment he made up his mind, clenched his teeth, snorted coldly and held the sword with both hands and roared loudly, "Absolutely! I won't lose to you." After he finished speaking, he suddenly slashed down with his sword. Instantly the huge white fireball was cut in half. At the same time the entire fireball roared and exploded with a thunderous sound. In an instant, a lot of sand and stones were burned into glass. At this time Dustless's face showed a smile, and then he slapped the ground and said indifferently, "You're very interesting, I want that sword in your hand, I want to study it." Lightning release, earth walk. As soon as he finished speaking, a shocking thunder and lightning spurted out from his hand, and directly walked on the ground like a snake, rushing towards Black Death in front of him in an instant. Black Death was instantly electrocuted by the thunder and lightning, and his whole body was numb. In an instant, he half knelt down and forced himself to stand up with the help of the sword and gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to rush forward again, he saw the energy rising from Dustless's body, and at the same time, under the surprised eyes of everyone, a giant appeared. Dustless also transformed into his ultimate form. In an instant, as if the real god of thunder had descended, a huge Japanese god of thunder appeared in front of everyone, and they couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. Dustless looked at all of this coldly, snorted and indifferently opened his huge wings, lowered his head proudly and said, "What, you still want to resist? Although your sword is strong, it's nothing compared to mine." At this point, Black Death's words immediately stabbed his heart. Black Death became even angrier and gritted his teeth. Although he maintained his human form, there was already a change inside. His body was filled with dark energy and suddenly, a cracking sound came from his body. He shouted loudly, "I will never lose to you bastards, I will never lose again." After he finished speaking, his eyes turned red and purple, and at the same time, a burst of energy rushed straight into the sky, and the terrifying power suddenly shocked everyone. Dustless's body erupted with the power of the ten-tailed beast. After all, there is a lot of power hidden in his body. More importantly, he even has the power of Akinoroja. The powerful power of Akinoroja and the ten-tailed beast shocked everyone present, and no one dared to act rashly at this time. Even Black Death, who burst out with amazing energy, was the same. When Mao Black Death felt the terrifying power, the blade in his hand fell to the ground. The dark energy on his body also dissipated at this time. He was stunned. Looking at the incomparably huge godlike power in front of him, he couldn't help but be stunned speechless. Dustless didn't hold back and suddenly raised the Tatsuka sword in his hand, and suddenly slashed down. The moment the sword slashed down, Black Death's head was directly sent flying. At the same time, the dark energy on the strange sword was also absorbed into the gourd. Black Death's soul slowly floated up at this time, and his eyes revealed a sense of helplessness. So this is what death feels like. The death that he had been afraid of was actually so easy. It's all over. Chapter 584. Oniasen. As he walked towards hell alone, he heard a familiar and slightly warm voice. "Black Death or Jigua Iwasheng, turned around and looked at his brother, a person who should have died long ago. Why is he waiting for me here? Jigwa Iwasheng's face was full of surprise, looking at his brother in a daze. He couldn't help but take a deep breath, and there was a bit of surprise in his eyes. Jigwa Iwasheng looked at his brother faintly and said, "It's time to pay for the sins of your life." Jigwa Iwasheng's face showed a smile, then he lowered his head and sighed, "I didn't expect you to wait for me, I didn't expect you to already know." Jigwa Iwasheng smiled and said, "I know you will definitely come to me, let's go together." Jigwa Iwasheng was a little surprised after hearing this. He nodded, took out the flute that has been hidden in his arms for many years, and after holding the flute tightly he smiled bitterly. The two brothers went to hell together. And at this time, Dustless directly closed his Manjikyu Sharingan, and at the same time, changed back to his human form in an instant, walked over and soon saw the sword on the ground. In fact, there is no evil aura on this strange sword, because it has been put away by Dustless. Dustless felt the evil aura inside and the sword in front of him. He picked up the sword and his eyes revealed a few complicated feelings. He shook his head and released a lot of chakra and suddenly squeezed it and directly crushed it. He said faintly, "It's another strange dark power, the last time it was the same in hell. It's really surprising, but maybe I can destroy it." Just as he said this, Mido, who was not far behind him, said with a little fear, "Brother Dustless." Dustless turned back and looked at Mi Bean. Everyone saw the surprise in their eyes and smiled embarrassedly. "Oh, sorry for letting you see. In fact, that's also a kind of secret technique. It's just a secret technique that you can't learn." When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but roll their eyes. Miduzi rolled her eyes and said, "I knew it a long time ago. I definitely knew that it wasn't a move that normal humans could learn." Dustless laughed and said, all right, since the matter is settled, let's go back first." Jiana directly absorbed the dark energy into his body. It was as if nothing had happened. Then he started to return with the rest of the group. Dustless's mood was somewhat complicated as he slowly walked on the road. One of them died, but Wu Ho's body also had that kind of dark energy. The more he thought about it, the more he frowned and snorted. As he walked, he slowly digested the energy in his body. Only then did he realize that it was incomparably familiar. He was very surprised. Wasn't this the condensed power of the black dragon Akunoroja and the ten-tailed beast's resentment, as well as the power of many vengeful spirits? The more he thought about it, the more surprised he became. Why would such power fall into their hands? This shouldn't be the case. Could it be that those stones? He suddenly remembered the stones left behind after the Rashomon was shattered. Could it be that they passed through there? Because the Rashomon was summoned by him, it contained his own power. The Rashomon was a place where evil spirits gathered, so there were many vengeful spirits and evil spirits. At this moment, Dustless understood. After coming over, he narrowed his eyes slightly and took a deep breath. At this moment, Tan Zhilong, who was beside him, seemed to have noticed what he was thinking about. He said strangely, "Dustless, are you thinking about something strange? I keep feeling that you have a lot on your mind." After Dustless heard this, he smiled bitterly with a little helplessness. He sighed and said, "It should be something that I can't help. Sigh, there's nothing I can do about it." Just as he said this, Tan Zhilong was very puzzled and said, "Ah? If that's the case, then what is it?" Dustless said at this moment, "No misery, it's about that guy's power. That guy's power is actually very close. It's a very taboo power in my hometown. It's a very terrifying power. Under normal circumstances, very few people would use that kind of power. I don't know where he got it from." Just as he said this, Tan Zhilong was suddenly stunned. He blinked his eyes in surprise and said in astonishment, "It can't be." Dustless smiled bitterly and scratched his head. "His body contains that kind of power. I can feel it, so." Tan Zhilong narrowed his eyes slightly and took a deep breath. He said with a slightly strange feeling, "Ah? So it's like that? That's really strange. In the past, I heard people say that no misery seemed to have become like that because of some kind of drug. But after hearing what you said, it seems that things aren't quite the same." Just as he said this, Dustless smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, I'm not very clear about this. I only know." Speaking up to this point, his eyes became sharp. He stood up and said, "Maybe there's some connection. But now we still have to find him. Otherwise, we won't be able to confirm this matter. We have to quickly get rid of that bastard." Speaking up to this point, his eyes became even sharper. He coldly snorted and took a deep breath. He wanted to quickly get rid of that bastard. He didn't want to feel that kind of power again. At the same time, The power of resentment might play a strange role in this world. This was something he really didn't want. He didn't want to let others use his power to do bad things. Last time he let Nero take control of a part of it. It was already very dangerous. If something happened this time, it would be very troublesome. He thought this in his heart. After hearing his words, everyone was stunned for a moment, then they all nodded. Soon, everyone arrived at the small path. However, they heard a voice. This time we will definitely be able to eliminate no misery. As long as the time is right, we can directly enter Limitless City. That's right. That's right. After Dustless and the others heard this, they felt a little excited. They hurriedly walked into the courtyard and saw that everyone was already there. Dustless and the others had just returned. Everyone immediately turned their heads to look at them. Chapter 585. The old address of the Bladesmith village was shrouded in smoke. At this time, a gloomy man in a suit appeared here. His eyes became colder and colder. He looked at the ruins coldly and felt the energy in it. He couldn't help but have a complicated expression as he clenched his teeth. Dancing Ghost Ming Wuxia came here, but this time it wasn't for a mission, nor was it to kill the Ghost Killer team. It was because he felt that his subordinates had died here. At the same time, he also felt that a force close to him had died here. At this moment after he came here, he suddenly understood that his former hometown, the person who was out of his control, Black Death Mao, Jigua Yansheng, is dead. At the same time, 2 of his subordinates had died here, and there wasn't even a corpse left. What was left was obviously completely dissipated. It was impossible for them to be resurrected. This made his expression extremely gloomy, and his eyes revealed a thick murderous intent. He clenched his teeth and looked at the gloomy weather. His expression became colder and colder. Although he could walk under the sun now, he wasn't satisfied with just walking under the sun. What he wanted to do was to make the whole world fall into darkness. Now that he had directly lost an ally and 2 subordinates, he was extremely angry. He clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. His eyes revealed a thick anger as he said, "Dustless." Just as he said this, a voice sounded in his ear, I didn't expect my brother to die so soon. What a pity." Dancing Ghost Ming Wuxia wasn't surprised after hearing the voice. Instead, he muttered to himself, "You have to be careful too. If I die, you will die too." Dancing Ghost Ming Wuxia knew who was talking in his body. It was the guardian ghost of Luoxing Men. Luoxing Men had a total of 3 guardian ghosts, and now one of them had died. There was one in Dancing Ghost Ming Wuxia's body, and the other one was completely materialized. If for some special reason his power hadn't fully recovered, so he hadn't appeared. The elder brother, the ghost of Rashomon, said coldly, "You can try. I've given you power, so you must fulfill your promise. This is the entire content of our deal. You must fulfill it. I've already given you power." Ghost dancer Ming Wuxia was cold. He narrowed his eyes and said, "I know what you mean. This time I will kill everyone in the Ghost Killer team. At the same time, I will create a world like yours. Because that is what I want too." His murderous aura surged as he spoke. This time he had already set up the best trap. It was much better than the last time. This time he would make all the members of the Ghost Killer team fall into the trap. He would have a chance to kill all of them in one fell swoop. By then, no one would be able to stop his hegemony. He would become the king of the dark world. At this moment, in the headquarters of the Ghost Killers. After listening to the plan, Dustless had some doubts. He frowned and asked curiously, "How did you come up with this plan? Why do I feel that it's a little unreliable? It doesn't seem that easy to kill him. How did you find the entrance to his final nest so quickly?" Just as he said this, Undying Gawa immediately said, "We've already investigated it. There is an entrance not far from the entrance of a cave. If we enter, we can directly find that bastard and kill him." At that time, Dustless interrupted, "Don't be so naive. That guy will definitely have defenses. Also, where did you get the information this time? What's going on?" Just as he said this, everyone was stunned for a moment. Then they heard Tomioka Yoshihide say, "The information came from a member before he died, so we have reason to believe that it's true. Of course, I also think that it's true because our members have no reason to lie to us. Also, we sent people to verify that there is an entrance there, but we don't know if it's the entrance to Limitless City." After hearing this, Dustless touched his chin and took a deep breath. He narrowed his eyes and said, "If that's the case, then let me go with you. Maybe it will be useful." If only a few of you go, then it's completely unreliable. Let's go together. After all, I also want to kill him. After hearing this, Yoshihide Fuji said, but you haven't recovered yet. You just went through a battle. If you go with us, then wouldn't it be? After hearing this, Dustless smiled and said indifferently, don't worry, I'm fine. I'm just afraid that you won't be able to cooperate with me. If possible, let's go together. Lamenting Yu Xingming nodded and said, if that's the case, then let's go together. Everyone was full of confidence when they heard this. At this moment, Dustless felt that something was wrong. He frowned slightly and took a deep breath. He couldn't help but think, those guys must have arranged something in that city. However, as long as he was there, nothing major would happen. At most, there would be some twists and turns. He could definitely eliminate that bastard even if he wanted to catch a turtle in a jar. Dustless also knew that as long as he was there, no one else would be able to do this move, because with his strength, he wouldn't let anyone die there, and he would definitely be able to kill all the ghosts inside. At this moment, Limitless City. Looking at the newly created subordinates in front of him, Wraith Dancer became even colder. He had lost many of his subordinates during the first quarter moon. The only one left in front of him was the newly appointed Song Nu and Iu. Only the older generation of the first quarter moon was left. Tong Mo, Tailang and Zuiji. This kind of faction was a bit embarrassing and unpleasant. Although their strength had increased a lot, it was inevitable that there would be accidents. Dancing Ghost frowned. He looked at the people present and said, this time, the mission will be even more difficult. As long as they enter the city, you must find a way to kill them all. I will cooperate with you and you must not let them escape. This is the plan I'm giving you. Do you understand? Everyone immediately replied in unison, we understand. Chapter 586. 3 days later, Dustless led the group to the entrance of the city. It was a narrow cave, but they could feel a special energy bursting out from it. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. If there was spatial energy, then things would be easier. With that thought in mind, he calmly said, everyone, if you split into small groups, you must be careful. Don't act rashly. We must find Wu Ku, who is hiding in the city. Don't let your emotions get the better of you. Everyone immediately nodded in agreement. This time, there were many people who followed them, but there were also some who stayed behind to guard the headquarters. Those who stayed behind to guard the headquarters were Lamenting Yu Xingming, Purgatory Shin Shou Lang, Scale Dragons Wujin Ji, Time Tu Lang and Yusi Tianyuan. As for the others, they would attack Limitless City. There were still many important items and important people in the headquarters, so they had to leave some people behind to protect them. However, with or without them, their hearts calmed down a lot. This time the attack would definitely succeed. Dustless quickly led the group and directly stepped into the space. As soon as they entered, they directly walked into a strange space. Various rooms floated in it, giving people a strange feeling. Dustless felt that the space was chaotic and energy was unceasingly flowing in it. He coldly snorted and slightly narrowed his eyes. He took a deep breath and suddenly widened his eyes, turning them into the whites of his eyes. In an instant he directly saw a wave of energy moving. It was the energy that belonged to his own body. With a cold snort, he turned around to look at the group and said, everyone, you must be careful. I have already found the target. I will chase after him first. You must be careful. After he finished speaking, he immediately jumped up and rushed forward. His speed was so fast that people couldn't help but jump in fright. After he left, Miduzi looked around and blinked. At this moment she felt the floor move. She took a deep breath and suddenly punched the floor, causing everyone to jump in fright. The floor was directly smashed open and at the same time, a ghost jumped out from it. Miduzi was incomparably fast as she retreated backwards. At this moment, the ghost that came out from the crack was none other than the prostitute Taro, who had obtained a new power. A cold, murderous look appeared on his face. Behind the crowd, a woman's laughter could be heard. You're all dead. How dare you barge in here? My lord said that he would capture all of you here and kill all of you. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone turned around and saw an extremely beautiful female ghost. At the same time, she was wearing a gorgeous dress and exuded a cold, murderous aura. She looked at everyone with disdain. Purgatory Xing Shou Lang quickly pulled out his saber and instantly entered the second form. At the same time, his eyes became ferocious. Flames ignited on his saber as he looked at everyone and said, let's begin. When the crowd heard this, they immediately agreed and nodded their heads. Every one of them revealed a cold killing intent. The killing intent floated up and directly targeted the two ghosts in front of them. Purgatory Xing Shoulang's eyes suddenly widened as he charged at the prostitute Taro in front of him. Harlot Taro, I was afraid of that crazy broadsword. Instead, he raised the hook in his hand to block it. The hook in his hand blocked the saber. However, immediately after, a powerful flame energy gushed out and pressed down on him. He couldn't help but jump in fright. Mi Duzi didn't have any reason to be polite. She suddenly jumped up and clenched her fists. Huge waves of water surged out of them. She shouted loudly, "You bastard, go die for me, Flood Dragon." As her voice fell, she clenched her fists and punched at Taro. Dr. Taro took a step back and jumped onto another building. The building on the roof was drifting away. He clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. He quickly swung his hook, and his hook instantly turned into countless hooks. At the same time, blood-red hooks appeared and surrounded everyone. However, at this moment a voice rang out. "Breath of the Beast, complete set." As soon as the words left his mouth, he saw two huge swords slashing toward Taro the needle prostitute. The wild fighting style, the two sabers with sharp teeth, and the appearance of a pig head made people feel that it was a little funny. However, that saber slash was solid. With a crack, it cut through the bones. The brothel owner, Turung Jie, was struck in the shoulder by the saber. Half of his body was chopped off. He sucked in a breath of cold air and quickly jumped into another house. At this moment, the powerful force that accompanied the fall of the saber instantly destroyed the house that he had just occupied. After destroying the room, Inosuk felt that he couldn't stand steadily. He suddenly jumped back to his original platform. She coldly sighed, looking with a bit of disappointment at the prostitute Taro, who was standing on top of a floating house not too far away. She said, "This fellow is really boring, he can't handle it at all." Just as he said this, Taro clenched his teeth and felt his scalp go numb. This guy's strength really couldn't be underestimated. As he thought of this, his eyes were filled with shock. He clenched his teeth tightly. For a moment, there were some things that he didn't want to believe. However, in reality he really couldn't win against this guy. At this moment, Inosuk, who was standing on the ground, didn't react. He felt a huge sense of weightlessness. Only then did the crowd react. A feeling of weightlessness came from beneath their feet. With a loud cry, the crowd dissipated and fell to different places. Taro heaved a sigh of relief. He and his sister were used as bait to lure them deeper. Therefore, at this time they had to directly lead them in. Otherwise, they wouldn't have appeared here. Seeing her brother injured, fallen concubine quickly came forward and said, "Brother, are you okay?" The prostitute Taro shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "I really wish that woman could move faster. Otherwise I'd be dead for sure. That fellow's blade is truly sharp. Furthermore, there are so many people here. For the two of us to be the bait, it is indeed a bit." Just as he said this, they heard a cold voice, "What are you whispering about? Why aren't you chasing after them?" The voice that came from the bottom of their hearts immediately made them shudder. The two siblings quickly chased after the direction where everyone fell. Chapter 587. Ishinosuk blinked his eyes and looked around. When he went there, he only saw a lotus pond in front of him. At the same time, he was surrounded by a square. He stood up blankly and felt strange. He always felt that something was wrong with him. He touched the back of his head and was very surprised. And at this time, he heard a voice, "Ishinosuk." Ishinosuk turned his head and looked over. It was a woman wearing a butterfly robe. Butterfly Ninja. At this moment, the butterfly ninja anxiously ran to his side and said, "Did you fall here too? Where is this place? It seems like there is a special seal here." Just as he said this, Ishinosuk's nose twitched, and his eyes revealed a bit of doubt. He took a deep breath and looked forward. Suddenly he was stunned. He saw a very beautiful man in front of him. Butterfly Ninja turned his head and looked over. In an instant, his eyes were filled with hatred. He couldn't help but widen his eyes and take a deep breath. The power of hatred surged. Because what appeared in front of them was incomparably beautiful, but at the same time, completely without a trace of human emotion. Tong Mo. There was a faint smile on Tong Mo's face. He looked at the two people in front of him and said, "Your eyes seem to know each other, but I don't seem to know you." Butterfly Ninja noticed that the man in front of him didn't have a smile on his face. He just wanted to smile. Then he said faintly, "I can see who you are. You are the person who killed my sister Tong Mo." After hearing this, Tong Mo couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. There was a bit of surprise in his eyes. He looked at the girl in front of him and said with a smile on his face, "So you are that woman's sister. It was really interesting at that time, but unfortunately, I didn't eat you." Although his face was full of smiles, he didn't have much intention to smile. He just wanted to smile. And at this time, Ishinasuk took a deep breath and nodded, "Call me a ghost. There is such a strong ghost aura on his body, and there is a strong smell of blood. It seems that he has eaten a lot of people. I have to kill him." After hearing this, Butterfly Ninja couldn't help but be stunned. This guy's reaction was really slow. Obviously this was a ghost. At this time, Ishinasuk directly threw the pig head on the ground and took a deep breath, revealing a beautiful face like a girl. Butterfly Ninja was stunned for a moment. Didn't this guy refuse to take off the pig head? How come now? Tong Emo took off the mask in front of him and said very strangely, "I remember, you are that woman's son." Ishinasuk took a deep breath at this time, shook his head and said strangely, "Although I don't know who you are talking about, I know that you should be a very familiar person to me, but you are a ghost, so let's kill you first." Just as he finished speaking, he abruptly pulled out his two blades and placed them in front of him. Tong Emo looked at Ishinasuk in front of him with some puzzlement. He said strangely, "What's the use of this? It's really strange." At this time, Butterfly Ninja immediately pulled out the sword in her hand. Facing the enemy in front of him, his hatred was completely released. At the same time, at this moment, his eyes suddenly widened. With the blessing of the curse seal and the support of the breathing technique, Butterfly Ninja's strength greatly increased, instantly turning into a super big sister of 1.8 meters. At the same time, the narrow blade in her hand became wider. The hook became deeper, and at the same time, her eyes became more focused. She directly entered the second state. Butterfly Ninja coldly looked at Tong Emo and said, I will take revenge." Tong Emo gently waved the ice fan in his hand, his face was full of disdain. But at this time they heard a voice, "Hashiman Tanku, 6th gate, open." Just as he said this, the two of them were shocked. At this moment they saw a terrifying green energy rushing into the sky. Kahirai Ishinasuk's division and concurrent position opened the 6th gate in an instant. The terrifying energy swept out in all directions. At this moment, even Tong Emo, who was the second first quarter master and had obtained a brand new power, could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. What was wrong with this stinking brat? Something was wrong, too wrong. Why was this fellow so strange? His power? Tong Emo frowned. For a time he clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. For a while he was speechless. What's wrong with this guy? Why? At this time, Ishinasuk wasn't satisfied. His eyes suddenly opened wide and then he shouted, "Don't underestimate me, I haven't used my full strength yet. Let me try this." After he finished speaking, the energy in his body rose, and the sound of an explosion was heard. The terrifying power gushed out, and the amazing strength was finally displayed. 6th gate, open. At the same time, his skin instantly grew spots. What was even more exaggerated was that the energy rising from his body seemed to be completely endless. This terrifying power made people shudder even though it was not cold. This incomparably terrifying power suddenly made Tong Emo clench his teeth. For a while he quickly said in surprise, "What's going on? Why is it like this? How could you possibly have such power?" The Butterfly Ninja also took a deep breath. His eyes narrowed slightly and he said faintly, "Not only him, I won't let you go, I will definitely cut you." At this time, the immortal breathing technique also came into effect. The moment the Butterfly Ninja's eyes widened, the energy surged, and in an instant the surroundings fell into turmoil. The first time in history. Tong Mo's heart was finally filled with fear. That was because this was a power that far exceeded his own. It was a power that was practically impossible to defeat. What kind of power was this? This caused his scalp to involuntarily turn numb. His eyes were filled with terror as he involuntarily jumped in fright. What's wrong with these two guys? It shouldn't be. With this kind of strength, how can they become so strong? Why is it like this? The more he thought about it, the more fear he felt. Chapter 588. Without any hesitation, Ishinasuk once again released an even more astonishing power. At this time, the dual blades became even wilder, and at the same time the energy in his body skyrocketed. At this time, Ishinasuk had completely entered the second state, and at the same time the strength of his body increased by a lot. His eyes turned red and purple. He picked up the two wild-fanged blades and slashed towards Tong Imo in front of him. Tong Imo saw the two wild-fanged blades slashing towards him. Tong Mo's eyes were filled with shock. Blood ghost art creeping lotus. The icy white fog formed vines one after another, and directly rushed towards Ashinasuk, who was attacking in front of him. The energy in Ashinasuk's body was very terrifying, although he didn't have any attack skills. However, it was incomparably terrifying. A thunderous rumble immediately sounded out as the blade smashed down, creating a huge hole in the ground. This caused the surrounding area to tremble. The powerful and terrifying strength caused Tong Mo's scalp to involuntarily turn numb. In an instant, he hurriedly retreated dozens of meters away. His eyes were full of surprise and he was shocked and he clenched his teeth. This guy's strength is very fast, how can it be so exaggerated? Insect's breath, butterfly's dance tease. At this time, the butterfly ninja suddenly jumped up, and the blade in his hand that had become incomparably wild slashed 5 times in a row, and suddenly 5 blade auras were released from 5 directions directly slashing down. When Tong Imo heard 5 rays of light flying towards him, he was shocked, but then he saw the golden fan in his hand completely spread out at this time, and at this time he quickly waved the fan in his hand and said with a disdainful sneer, "Only this strength? Blood ghost art, withered garden falling snow." When Tong Mo's words fell, a golden fan appeared in both of his hands, and at the same time he waved it and suddenly the 5 blade auras were completely dissipated in an instant. There was a slight hint of ridicule in his eyes, and although it was a little difficult, he still didn't lose some of his elegance. He said coldly, "This kind of strength is really not enough." As soon as he said that, the butterfly was infuriated. She took a deep breath while holding the saber in one hand. Her eyes suddenly widened, and the immortal energy in her body became even more vigorous. He said coldly, "You damned bastard, you don't have the slightest smell of living on your body." Just as he said this, a faint smile appeared on Tong Mo's face. He shook his head and said, "Who is the one to decide who should live and who should die? My body is filled with a smell that you humans don't like, but your bodies are filled with a smell that I like." As he spoke, a faint smile appeared on his face. And at this moment, after hearing these words, the butterfly ninja became even more impolite. He had been training for a long time. This time he came to avenge his sister, so he definitely wouldn't be polite. Insect's breath, bee's tooth dance, Zhenyi. He abruptly made a move and leaped into the air. A pair of butterfly-like wings sprouted from his back and flapped them in an instant. At the same time, an incomparably sharp light appeared on his saber. He directly made a move towards Tong Imo. When Tong Imo saw the saber coming towards him, a look of disdain appeared on his face. He shook his head and sighed, "So what if I let you stab me? Your saber can't hurt me at all, come and try." Blood demon art, scattering lotus. He immediately used a powerful move. The fan in his hand suddenly slashed down like a saber. Instantly, a saber aura accompanied by countless sharp ice shards rushed towards the butterfly ninja in front of him. The butterfly ninja was filled with determination. How could he be afraid at this moment? Facing the saber aura, he only snorted coldly and stabbed his saber. In an instant, the saber broke through the ice shards with a loud boom. In an instant, Tong Imo reacted and quickly condensed a block of ice in front of him. He flew back and jumped to the side of the lotus pond. With a bitter laugh, the ice shards immediately exploded. Tong Mo's eyes were filled with surprise. He couldn't help but say in amazement, "Compared to your sister, you have improved a little. Your sister doesn't have much strength and insisted on using her saber to chop off my head. You are very different. Your stab is very effective." When he finished speaking, the butterfly ninja immediately swung his saber. In an instant, a biting cold light flashed. He took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes slightly. He said, "Is that so?" Just as he said that, he heard a voice ring out. "Beast's breath, type 8, explosive advance." Mohei Ishinasuk's voice rang out. He suddenly increased his speed. In an instant his speed reached the limit. In an instant, with a boom, he appeared beside Tong Imo. Tong Imo immediately gripped his fan tightly with both hands. However, before he could react, he saw 2 ridiculously huge fanged sabers smashing down on his head. He couldn't help but jump in fright. However, he quickly waved his fan like a saber and 2 huge icicles appeared in an instant. After the fanged broadsword hit the icicle was instantly shattered. Tong Imo flew up and quickly jumped into the lotus pond sculpture. He couldn't help but breathe. He was a little nervous. This guy is a little difficult to deal with, he just thought. Beast's breath, Geo's teeth stretched snake crack. When the voice rang out, the two people were shocked. Mohei Ishinasuk directly lengthened, or it could be said that he became even bigger. At the same time, his hands instantly became like a snake holding two sabers. He directly rushed towards the huge sculpture. His speed was incomparably fast. Suddenly, the sculpture was slashed apart by the thunder god. Tong Moshi, who was standing on top of the sculpture, was stunned. He suddenly jumped into the sky and at the same time, waved his two fans. He softly chanted, "Blood Demon Art, Spreading Lotus." When he said that, he successfully cast the art. In an instant, countless ice crystals slowly flew towards Mohei Ishinasuk behind him and attacked. At this time, Mohei Ishinasuk only showed a disdainful expression. He swung his sabers and shouted loudly, "Beast's breath, Geo's teeth spinning teeth." Suddenly the two sabers rotated and all the attacks were dissolved. He turned around and slashed. Chapter 589. Tong Imo was a little surprised and immediately turned around. At the same time, the two swords were blocked by his fan, but he was also sent flying more than 10 meters away. Saito Ishinasuk has been in 3 states for a long time, so he was a little tired. But soon he gritted his teeth and said, "I'll fight for a chance, I'll kill him with one slash." Hearing this, Tong Imo nodded. The butterfly ninja grunted and nodded. Then he took a deep breath and jumped up. The saber in his hand spun and opened up. Insect's breath, fly's dance, compound eye hexagon. The butterfly ninja didn't hold back, and in an instant, his wings grew again. The sword in his hand stabbed towards the enemy in front of him. Tong Imo saw the butterfly ninja stabbing towards him, and his face was a little confused. Is this guy stupid? How can he attack? Just as he was thinking this, he couldn't help but be stunned. The one in front of him suddenly turned into 6 people, and at the same time, they attacked from 6 different directions. When Tong Imo heard this scene, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he laughed very excitedly and with both hands holding the fan he said excitedly, "Interesting, this is fun. Woman, you're quite interesting, I didn't expect you to be able to display such strength. Since you have such an interesting move, I'll use an even more interesting move to respond." The moment he stabilized his horse stance, the wide and beautiful robe on his body was stretched open, and he suddenly shouted, "Blood Demon Art, Frozen Cloud." Suddenly, the power that was displayed directly swept over, and the 6 people were directly frozen. What's more, the 6 people were directly shattered in an instant. At this time, his face showed a cold smile and slowly put away the fan and took 2 or 3 steps back. Looking at the slowly falling ice crystals, there was a slight disdain on his face. At this time, he couldn't help but twitch his nose and suddenly he was stunned. In an instant, his face was stunned, and his eyes were full of surprise, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. He directly knelt down, gritted his teeth and stepped back again. His eyes narrowed slightly. The fear of death came again and this made his scalp numb. This is such a familiar smell and such a concentrated smell. The butterfly ninja swung his blade out of the icy white mist and walked out. He said in an elegant voice, "It's a poison that has been concentrated 700 times. The poison of wisteria. At the same time, this poison will only work on you ghosts because I have made a special modification. More importantly, this poison no longer has a color like before. I specially changed it to be colorless and odorless. Only when it enters your body will you be able to smell the Chinese wisteria gas drifting in the air." When he said this, Tong Imo was already starting to feel the strain on his body. He forced himself to his feet and retreated a dozen steps. Then he coughed out a mouthful of blood. This was a type of poison. Tong Imo suddenly felt that something was amiss. He had thrown out so many ice crystals but they were completely ineffective. Could it be that these two didn't need to breathe? Something was wrong. With this thought in mind, he narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth, shouting, "I will never lose to you two idiots. Blood Ghost Art, Fierce Cold Baiji." After he finished speaking, he slapped his hands on the ground and a huge ice statue appeared. The ice statue appeared in front of the two. At the same time, the butterfly ninja couldn't help but jump in fright. However, he quickly retreated backward. The ice sculpture was a beautiful woman. The woman opened her mouth and countless poisonous gas floated out. In an instant, the gas rushed towards the two of them. The poisonous gas was accompanied by ice. If it entered the two's body, they would die instantly. However, this was only Tong Mo's guess. Something unexpected happened. Within the icy white fog, the two of them were just standing there in a very light manner. Mouthy Ashinasuk had been preparing all this time. His eyes narrowed, and the two fang blades in his hands were stabbed into the ground beside him. He didn't move, he just stood there. He didn't want to waste any more time. He wanted to finish off this terrifying man-eating ghost in front of him in one blow. At this time, Baiji finally attacked. In an instant she raised her hand and attacked the two. The butterfly ninja wasn't the same. The woman who used to be weak when holding a blade coldly snorted and waved the blade in her hand. She took a deep breath and slashed out. Insect's breath, dance of the butterfly, tease. It was merely a single slash, but it possessed an immense destructive power. In an instant, it caused the ice statue in front of him to shatter. The terrifying power caused Tong Mo to involuntarily jump in fright. Tong Mo frowned slightly. After being startled, he jumped up in surprise and coldly snorted, "I will definitely not lose to you guys." After saying that, he took a deep breath. Energy surged in his body and he shouted, "Blood Ghost Art, Winter Ice Pillar." They jumped directly into the air. At the same time, countless ice condensed in an instant, condensing into a white cloud above their heads. Tong Mo jumped behind the two of them and said coldly, "Die in the ice. I'm already angry. I don't want to play with you brats anymore." After saying that, he slowly put away his fan, thinking that the matter was over. Then he heard a cold voice appear. "If you think that it's over, then you're too naive. Seventh Gate of Wonder, open." The moment the voice fell, Ishinasuk had already turned on a powerful energy switch in an instant. In an instant, transparent blood vessels immediately appeared on his body. At the same time, he suddenly turned around and slashed with his sword. The ice was about to fall. At that moment, the high energy soared into the sky, breaking all the clouds in an instant. The incomparably terrifying power had destroyed all the clouds in an instant. The blood ghost tree had also been completely dispelled in an instant. Mouthy Ashinasuk was only accumulating energy. He didn't use up all his energy. Chapter 590. When Tong Mo saw this, he couldn't help but jump in fright. The butterfly ninja seized the opportunity and jumped up with incredible speed. At the same time, he flapped his wings and the blade in his hand instantly turned into a slender sword. Insect's breath, centipede's dance, 100 feet snake belly. The moment the voice fell, the butterfly ninja flew out. The butterfly ninja had already rushed out. The thin arrow in his hand was as thin as a toothpick. He quickly attacked. Tong Mo didn't have time to see clearly, but he discovered that there were hundreds of wounds on his body. He couldn't help but jump in fright and quickly retreated. In half a second there were hundreds of holes on his body. But soon, with the ghost's regenerative ability, he quickly returned to his original state. His face revealed a disdainful sneer as he rolled his eyes and said, "So that's it? You're just tickling me?" When he said this, there was a hint of mockery in his voice. The butterfly ninja slowly retracted his blade and returned to his normal state. He lightly said, "Ishizuk, the rest is up to you." After Ashinasuk heard this, he nodded, and his speed began to speed up. Beast's Breath 18th Explosive Advance. His speed was extremely fast, close to the speed of light. In an instant there was a loud bang as he hit Tong Mo. Tong Mo didn't have time to see clearly and his entire body was sent flying into the air. At the same time he stabilized his body in the air. But at this moment, immediately, a violent gust of wind came from behind him. When he heard the sound, he immediately turned around to attack. But just as he was about to attack, his hand fell to the ground. He was stunned. Beast's Breath, Second Fong Slash. When the voice rang in his ears, he discovered that his right hand was also broken. Ishizuk's speed was more than 10 times faster than before. The blade in his hand was constantly waving and cutting off both of Tong Mo's hands. Then he suddenly slammed his head down and knocked Tong Mo to the ground. Tong Mo heaved a sigh of relief as he hastily turned around and ran. His face was filled with terror, and the fear of death caused his scalp to turn numb. Tong Mo clenched his teeth tightly and his hands quickly grew back. He quickly took out a fan and shouted, "I won't die, you damn bastards." Blood Demon Art Crystallization Yuko. The moment he landed, he waved the fan in his hand. Immediately the energy in his body surged. In an instant, an exact copy of himself appeared in front of him. It was the clone that he had created. In an instant, Zhong immediately rushed out. The fan in his hand was as sharp as a knife. In an instant he directly slashed at Zuihii Ishinasuk. Ishinasuk just snorted in disdain. With a slash, a loud sound came out. Beast breath, three fangs fang tear. That powerful force instantly tore the clone into pieces. When Ishinasuk landed on the ground, Tong Imo was already a dozen meters away from him. At the same time, his eyes widened as he clapped his hands together and roared, "Who would lose to you?" Blood Ghost spell Mist Ice Water Lotus Bodhisattva. As soon as his voice fell, the ice immediately formed a huge bodhisattva. A huge ice bodhisattva appeared in front of them. The butterfly ninja was a little worried in his heart, but the corner of his mouth outlined a confident smile. "I will win this time." And just at this moment, Ishinasuk took a deep breath. The moment he clenched his swords, his body burst out. With a bang he arrived in front of the huge ice bodhisattva statue that had just formed. Day Tiger. Just as his voice fell at this moment, a powerful energy gushed out from his body, causing the surroundings to shake. A huge tiger directly tore all the ice, tore the cold wind, and tore Tong Mo, who was trying to escape to recover. Tong Mo's body was cut in half, and he was also sent flying more than 10 meters away. Only then did he slowly stabilize and land on the road. At the same time there was a long gully on the road. Ishinasuk completely broke all the power in one move, but he was also exhausted at this time. He directly breathed a sigh of relief, gritted his teeth and dropped his swords on the ground. His whole body half knelt down. At the same time the transparent blood vessels returned to their original state. His fluttering long hair also directly drooped down. At this moment, the butterfly ninja rushed forward and quickly supported Ishinasuk, who was about to fall down. Ishinasuk must be exhausted. After using so much power, his face was full of fatigue and he said with a wry smile, "Finally defeated him." The butterfly ninja seemed to think of something and there was a bit of doubt in his eyes as he said, "You and him?" Ishinasuk faintly said, "He is my enemy who killed my mother. I lived with him for a period of time but then he killed my mother. My mother threw me into the river to drift and finally let me live." From the first time he saw this enemy in front of him, and that cold and elegant style, this seemingly wild child, but in fact, this meticulous young man remembered his own life experience. So he wanted to end the enemy in front of him with one strike. At this moment, Tong Mo still stood up. His body was originally cut into two halves, but the two halves fused together and became a complete body. When he stood up, he laughed wildly and said with a face full of smiles, "Do you think you've won? You just made me spend a lot of power, I have obtained powerful energy, no one can defeat me, do you think?" His body spewed out an amazing amount of dark energy, but at this time, Ishinasuk felt very troublesome and wanted to stand up and fight. The butterfly ninja faintly said, "If you think you can still fight, if you think you can still survive, then give it a try." Tong Mo couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of nervous foam in horror. His fused body began to dissipate. He only felt that he was melting like a candle and he suddenly felt pain. He was very surprised and said, "Why is this happening?" The butterfly ninja said indifferently, "Why is it like this?" "Because your body has already been pierced by me hundreds of times, but in that instant, I injected 7,000 times the wisteria poison. Moreover, it's profitable. When your strength is almost exhausted, it will directly dissolve your body." Tong Mo's face changed but he had no face and in an instant, his body melted and at the same time, his soul scattered with the wind to hell. Chapter 591. On the other side, Wuchen was a little more vigilant when he looked around. He snorted coldly and chased after the power of darkness. At this time he came to a shabby room. Looking at the energy surging around him in the shabby room, he said coldly, "Come on." Just as he said that, then he heard a voice coming from behind him, "You really chased after me. That's great. Then let me kill you right here. I'll take your body and become a real human." Dustless turned his head and looked over. He couldn't help but be stunned. That was a person with only half a face. Half of that person's face was that of a human, while the other half had a disgusting appearance of boiling flesh and blood, as if it had been boiled alive. He was 1.9 meters tall, with a saber hanging from his waist and a hideous ghost armor on his body. His appearance made people feel nauseous and disgusted. Dustless looked at the man in front of him and said indifferently, "Who are you? I've never seen you before." After hearing this, the man's ugly and disgusting face showed a cold smile and said, You don't need to know who I am. You only need to know that I'll take your body and soul and become a real powerful human. I'll become a god. Dustless felt strange. Why did this man's words not make sense? It was inexplicable. At this moment, the man laughed loudly. He suddenly pulled out his saber and slashed directly at Dustless. Dustless saw the man's saber slashing at him. He snorted and instantly activated the lightning armor. He flew back and the saber slashed at the air. Dustless pulled out his saber in an instant. The saber was covered with a thick heavenly cursed thousand birds. The heavenly cursed thousand birds released a shocking cry at that moment. It rushed forward and slashed at the man. The man's saber blocked it in an instant. The saber and the spear collided and sparks flew. However, the energy on his body was able to completely isolate him. Dustless's face was slightly surprised. He narrowed his eyes and said curiously, I didn't expect you to be able to do this. I really don't know how you did it, but I'm very curious. Just as he said this, the man said coldly, Don't be curious. I'm the devil in your heart. You just accidentally released it. So, go to hell. After hearing this, Dustless was even more puzzled. Then he saw the man suddenly increase his strength and directly pushed Dustless away. Dustless landed on the ground. When he stood firmly, he snorted. Energy surged. He took a deep breath and formed a seal with one hand. He snorted coldly. He narrowed his eyes, took a deep breath and suddenly exhaled. Fire escape, grand fireball. A huge fireball was spat out from his mouth. It directly caused the surroundings in the room to burn. However, he only felt a cold ice power rising in an instant. An incomparably oppressive cold ice power appeared on the man's body, instantly causing the temperature to drop. At the same time, the fireball was split open by his saber in an instant. He looked coldly at Dustless and said, With your strength, you can't kill me. Moreover, you can only supply me with energy. After he finished speaking, he laughed loudly. He held the saber in his hand, jumped up, and slashed at Dustless. Dustless felt the saber coming at him again. He snorted coldly. His expression changed again and again. He took a deep breath and gently stepped back. Energy gathered in his hand. Suddenly, the power of chi magic appeared in his hand. He shouted loudly, Demons, ghosts, leave. As soon as he finished speaking, countless talismans appeared in his palm. He slammed his palm forward. The sound of thunder exploding rang out, and the powerful force immediately sent that terrifying person flying. He fell to the ground and at the same time, there was a burnt stench on his body. The man used his saber to support his body and quickly stood up. His face was filled with disbelief. He said in surprise, Why is it like this? It shouldn't be. How can you do this? After Dustless heard this, he snorted coldly and said with a faint smile, What can't I do? Do you really think I'm a fool? Can't you see? Your body has an extremely strong smell of hell and it also has the smell of my body. I can guess that you're the ghost of Luoxing's sect. After hearing this, the man's face suddenly changed. He couldn't help but reveal a deep surprise in his eyes. He said, How did you? Dustless shook his head and sighed. He said with a helpless face, You're really too stupid. You want to go against your master? I know you're not convinced, but your strength is too weak. Moreover, your thinking is too immature. You dare to fight with me? You must be joking with me. After saying this, he gently walked forward. At this moment, the energy in his hand surged. The 5 elemental energy gathered on his 5 fingers. The ghost of Luoxing's sect didn't dare to resist and was directly hit in the head. The 5 elemental energy on Dustless's 5 fingers entered the body of the ghost of Luoxing's sect. Suddenly, his hand was like a tiger's claw and he clenched it. The ghost of Rashomon let out a loud cry, and its entire body dispersed, turning into countless dark energy that merged into Dustless's body. At this time, Dustless coldly snorted. He shook off the blood on his hand and directly sealed the energy into his body. Of course, he used the power of chi magic. He coldly snorted and said, I didn't expect to be able to attract such a bloody evil ghost. This is really interesting. He knew that there was another ghost of Luoxing's sect. Because he summoned 3 Luoxing sects, there should be another one that ran out. Thinking like this, at this moment in another final battlefield, everyone had already faced the final powerhouse, Ghost Dancer Wu Huai. The dancer ghost Wu Xie's face was cold and ferocious. His eyes were full of killing intent. When he looked at everyone, he was full of cold killing intent. He coldly said, Who do you think you are? You think you can kill me? That's impossible. No one can kill me. I'm immortal. He had been fighting with everyone for a long time. At the same time he was a little tired, but the dark energy in his body forced him to endure. Chapter 592. Meduzi, who was in front of him, was the first to attack. She roared, "You bastard, go and die. A scourge like you should die quickly." After she finished speaking, a huge amount of dragon energy condensed in her hand. The moment the huge dragon energy appeared in her hand, she punched out. A disdainful smile appeared on Onishi's face. Dark energy surged on his body. Although his shirt was completely torn apart, revealing his strong muscles, he calmly waved his hand. Immediately dark energy surged out. Dark blood hand. Instantly, an incomparably huge dark blood demon hand appeared on the ground. That was to stop the enormous dragon chi. As a result, Meduzi was blocked, and she was even pushed back by a powerful aura. When Tanjiro heard that his sister's attack was thwarted, he coldly snorted and jumped up. At the same time, the blade in his hand spun and emitted light. "I won't forgive you." After saying that, he immediately slashed down with his blade. The blade carried a violent splash as it slashed down. After it slashed down, it instantly split the blood hand into two. However, it was useless. More apprentices were born beside the crowd. One after another, dark soldiers were born. The dark soldiers immediately charged towards the crowd, causing a huge disturbance to the crowd. When Tanjiro saw the dark soldiers, he clenched his teeth and hurriedly retreated while protecting the crowd. At this moment, Tomioka Yoshiaki clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. His eyes slightly narrowed as he said, "It seems that this guy is determined to kill all of us here." Tanjiro also nodded and took a deep breath. He was already prepared to sacrifice himself, but the prerequisite was that he must defeat the enemy. He clenched his teeth and said, "No, we must quickly defeat him. If we continue to waste time like this, we won't have a good ending." At this moment, Meduzi was also slightly affected. The dark energy caused her eyes to become sharper. She hurriedly said, "The dark energy on this guy's body can have a slight effect on our strength." Just as she said that, Purgatory Xing Shoulang nodded. After killing the two darkness soldiers, he discovered that the energy in his body had become even more irritable and difficult to control. He couldn't help but have a headache as he said, "Indeed, it is indeed difficult to control." At this moment, Undying Kawa, who was already incomparably wild, was completely indifferent. He held the dark green blade in his hand and jumped left and right. He had already killed a dozen dark soldiers. However, he knew that these dark soldiers were created. At most they would be consumed. But for him it would be even more. At this moment, Honeydew Temple's Mealy could not help but frown. Her eyes revealed a pondering look as she said, "This is even more troublesome. This guy seems to have an endless number of soldiers." At this moment, outside the final battle gate, my wife, Shan-Yi, couldn't help but have a solemn expression on her face. Looking at her senior brother who had completely fallen, she felt a little helpless. My wife Shan-Yi took a deep breath and said, "Do we really have to guard this gate?" Her senior brother, Ling Yu, revealed a malevolent expression. The corner of his mouth curved into a cold disdain. He looked at my wife Shan-Yi with a smile and said with cold mockery, "Aren't you the same as me now? I've become a ghost and you've become neither human nor ghost. It's really disgusting. You were already very disgusting before. Now that you've become like this, it's really disdainful." My wife Shan-Yi's words to her senior brother were completely unfounded. Ling Yu took a deep breath and flew back 2 or 3 steps. Looking at the gate that his senior brother was guarding, he knew that it was the final battle gate. If he didn't go in and participate, then what was the point? How could he help everyone? With this thought in mind, he became more and more determined. He tightly gripped the 1.5-meter-long tachi in his hand. Yu made him assume the posture of drawing his sword and slashing. He said coldly, "Is that all? You can only use the first form? It's simply laughable." My wife Shani only said indifferently, "I might only use one move, and that's the move to kill you. I won't lose to you." Ling Yu didn't have any intention of being polite. He directly rushed towards my wife Shani in an instant. The moment he got close, a soft voice came out of his mouth. "Thunder Breath second form, Rice Soul." A powerful and surging power of thunder and lightning instantly erupted. My wife Shan-Yi directly used the tachi in her hand to block it and was forced back a dozen steps. He wasn't discouraged. Instead, he was sensing how strong his senior brother had become. Sure enough, he had become very strong. However, he wasn't discouraged. He only took a deep breath and said indifferently, "You've become a lot stronger, but to me you're still not strong enough. You're still not strong enough." Lingyu was a bit angry. He gritted his teeth and took a deep breath. His eyes slightly narrowed as he coldly said, "Who do you think you are? You think you can teach me a lesson like that old man? Even if that old man is already dead, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are?" When he said this, he angered Shani even more. However, it still allowed him to remain calm. My wife Shani took a deep breath and put away the tachi again. At the same time, her tears deepened and the mark on her face became even more serious. She said, "Although you're very strong, although you've learned more moves than me, and have powerful ghost energy and a very dense dark energy, even so, evil can't win against good. I definitely won't lose to someone like you." When he said this, it contained his acknowledgement of himself, but at the same time, it also contained his disdain for his fallen senior brother. His eyes revealed a bit of relief. In the past he was despised by his senior brother, but he didn't dare to resist. He didn't understand why it was like that. Now that she thought about it, perhaps she was a bit jealous. Perhaps she was like a scoundrel who just wanted to find someone to vent her anger on. My wife Shani understood and said indifferently, "I will kill you here and wash away Master's humiliation. I will take back all of the thunder breath." When she said this, she coldly turned around and looked at Lingyu. Chapter 593. When Yu heard this, he couldn't help but sneer. His eyes carried a bit of disdain as he laughed out loud. "You think you can defeat me with your strength? Even?" My wife Shan-Yi wasn't good with words and he didn't plan on using words to speak. It was the stance of the thunderbolt flash. Immediately after, he took a deep breath and lowered his head. There was only a bit of pity in his eyes, but after he slowly closed them, there was no longer any pity. Instead, a shocking murderous aura erupted from his body. Iyu's eyes were full of surprise. He couldn't help but be startled. There was a strange feeling in his eyes. This junior brother seemed to have become a lot stronger. Just as he thought of this, he immediately shook his head, thinking that he had seen wrongly. However, he immediately snorted coldly, took a deep breath and coldly swung his blade. Immediately, an astonishing ghost force erupted from his body. He coldly said, "Who do you think you are? You think you can defeat me? Even that old man might not be my match right now." My wife Shani heard about the master and indifferently said, "Master is already dead." Iyu hesitated for a moment when he heard this, but he quickly laughed coldly and said, "Isn't it pretty good? He was so old and should have died long ago. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be able to learn." My wife Shani coldly said, "You already have a lot. Unfortunately, you don't know how to cherish it. You only want more, that's all." Iyu was startled after hearing this. There was a bit of surprise in his eyes and he didn't understand what his junior brother wanted to say. However, at this moment he felt a vigorous murderous aura erupt. He couldn't help but widen his eyes and take a deep breath. Iyu made his move. Thunder Breath 6th Form, Thunderous Thunder Explosion. After he finished speaking, he directly made his move, but he was too slow. He had become a ghost and his physical fitness had greatly improved. Moreover, he had obtained a portion of the power of darkness. However, he was still too slow, too slow. My wife Shan Yi's speed was unimaginably fast. Puchi. The sound rang out. My wife Shan Yi's speed was so fast that it was unbelievable. She immediately appeared behind Iyu. He slowly put away the knife and said coldly, "You have already lost." Iyu lowered his head and looked down. There was a very long, slanted cut from his chest to his stomach. The wound ran through his entire body. He knelt down, his eyes filled with fear. When he turned his head, my wife Shan-Yi coldly said the name of the move just now, Breath of Thunder, 8th Form Death Song. After saying that, suddenly, blood gushed out from the Lantern District like a beautiful flower. My wife Shan-Yi's face was as cold as ice. There was no change at all. There was only a cold murderous aura on his face. Facing the murderer who killed his master, he no longer had any mercy. Even if it was his senior brother, so what? Killing the murderer was what he had to do. As for Iyu, he directly fell to the ground. His body turned into a faint energy that dissipated, and his soul also rose into the sky in confusion. Just as my wife, Shan-Yi, pushed open the door to the final battlefield. Two strange voices sounded from behind. "Are you going in? The two of us have no intention of letting you in." My wife, Shan-yi, turned around and saw the siblings. His expression became even colder as he said coldly, "So it's the two of you." The two siblings were naturally the prostitutes Taro. Dancer Ghost's plan was to lure everyone into the final battlefield. Of course, after being lured in, no one could enter the final battlefield, and they would be the ones to stop the reinforcements. Inside, the dancing ghost demon would defeat everyone and devour them to become even stronger. Then, they walked out of the final battlefield and killed all the reinforcements. The ones who stopped the reinforcements before that were the siblings. My wife, Shan-yi, looked at the brother and sister in front of her. She naturally knew that it would be very difficult for her to deal with two first-quarter moons. However, he knew that he had to kill these two people. He didn't want to let any ghost go. She took a stance and her expression became very cold. At this moment, fallen concubine laughed loudly. Her face revealed a disdainful sneer as she said, "Who do you think we are? Do you think we will be easily defeated by you? Are you the same as your useless senior brother?" Just as she finished speaking, the belts on her waist instantly moved. Super 8 belt slash. Suddenly, several belts directly turned into wide blades and launched a fierce attack towards my wife, Shan-yi. My wife, Shan-yi, jumped and at the same time made a move. He didn't know any other thunder breath forms, except for the thunderbolt flash that he learned from his master. Since then he had never learned any other moves. However, he created his own move because he knew that if he couldn't learn any other moves, he could only desperately create one. This was him. My wife, Shan-yi. The blade was instantly unsheathed. The 1.5-meter-long blade was held with both hands and drew a big circle in the blink of an eye. My wife, Shan-yi's eyes widened. In an instant she loudly shouted, "Thunder breath, 9-form full moon thunder." As soon as his words fell, countless bolts of lightning appeared beside him, directly shattering all the cloth blades that were flying over. Fallen concubine received a terrifying power and couldn't help but be shocked. She quickly retreated. However, my wife, Shan-yi, who was in midair, instantly grasped her retreating speed. My wife, Shan-yi's waist was full of lightning flashing. She loudly shouted, "Thunder breath form, thunderbolt flash." Then, in that instant, a yellow light suddenly fell from the sky, and the broadsword directly slashed towards Fallen Concubine. Fallen Concubine Street was shocked. However, immediately after, they heard a cold and strange voice. "You want to kill my sister? You didn't ask me. You want to kill people but you didn't ask me." The prostitute Taro really cared for his sister. In an instant she flashed and took out two sickles. In an instant she blocked the large blade and pushed it upwards. My wife, Shan-yi, was pushed away. She crashed twice in midair before landing on the ground. However, the blade had already returned to its scabbard. At the same time she half knelt on the ground, her hand holding the hilt. Chapter 594. Surd's expression froze. He had never seen such a crazed Blackbeard. Blackbeard's eyes glowed with a dim light, and his sinister smile was no longer as amiable as before. He had abandoned his human skin and was no different from an evil and filthy demon. The strange smile on the corner of his mouth made Thatch instinctively feel bad, and he stepped back subconsciously. Poochie. There was a sharp pain in his abdomen, and his face was as pale as paper. His eyes were wide open as he looked at the blunt weapon inserted into his abdomen. The one holding him was his most trusted Titch. His pupils were enlarged several times. Apparently, Thatch was extremely surprised by Blackbeard's actions. He was in a trance, and his empty eyes seemed to think that this was a dream. What a stupid idiot. Such a character can be a captain. Whitebeard pirate. It seems that it's only a matter of time before you die. His cold eyes were full of viciousness and fierceness. Blackbeard's killing intent soared. Seeing that Thatch was still immersed in his fantasy, the corner of his mouth rose into a mocking smile. His fierce eyes were extremely cruel, and the blunt weapon in his hand began to rotate. Kaka. The jagged blunt weapon rotated in Thatch's abdominal cavity, crushing all his organs, and the violent tingling instantly surged all over his body. Thatch grimaced in pain. At the same time, he returned to his senses and glared at Blackbeard, wishing he could perish together with him. Why are you looking at me like this? You know we are good brothers. Ah. Even though he tried his best to suppress his laughter, in the end, Blackbeard could not help but laugh out loud. His ugly body trembled rhythmically because of his unbridled laughter. His stubble-covered belly swayed back and forth, dazzling everyone's eyes. It seems that what that guy said is true. Seeing Blackbeard laughing so wildly, Thatch immediately understood the reason and blamed himself. If he hadn't listened to Blackbeard's temptation, he wouldn't have fallen into such a miserable situation. The members of the Whitebeard pirates on the island all died because of his recklessness. Keha. Sir, it's because you're too benevolent that I took the initiative to contact you because I saw this. If you were half as smart as Marco and the others, my scheme wouldn't have succeeded. Keha. His repressed emotions were finally released. His arrogant and wild laughter rang out continuously. Blackbeard unscrupulously vented the depression and annoyance that had accumulated in his heart for many years. Blackbeard clearly had the strength comparable to Red-Hair Shanks, one of the 4 emperors, but he was secretly Whitebeard's underling. It would be strange if Blackbeard was not depressed. Bang! Witnessing Blackbeard's carelessness, Surd's fist was covered with armament hockey and mobilized the remaining strength of his whole body and blasted towards Blackbeard's face. People would often erupt with extraordinary potential when they were in a life-and-death situation. Surd was currently like this. His full-strength punch had sent Blackbeard, who was far stronger than him, flying. Ouch, it hurts so much. Motherf *Cur, I'm going to chop you into pieces today, grind your bones and scatter your ashes before throwing them into the sea to feed the sea kings. Rolling on the ground in a sorry state, Blackbeard covered his nose with his rough hands. He glared at Surd and roared in a sharp voice. The hatred in his words was so deep that he wanted to peel Surd's skin and break his bones. Damn you! Holding his blood-stained teeth in both hands, Blackbeard's old face twitched with anger. When he dueled with Red Hair, he accidentally lost a few teeth. Now he was caught off guard by Surd's sneak attack and lost several teeth. There were only a few teeth left in his mouth. In the future, he didn't need to eat with his teeth. He could just swallow directly. Anyway, he was going to lose his teeth soon. Arrogance is your biggest shortcoming. It doesn't matter if you kill me. You will suffer in the future, Titch. Surd laughed as he knelt on the ground. Looking at Blackbeard with his mouth full of blood, Surd was unwilling, but there was nothing he could do. It was not that he was incompetent, but that Blackbeard, a deep-sea shark, hid too deep. When he showed his fangs, it was already too late. Ah, don't feel lonely. It won't be long before Whitebeard, that old bastard, follows you into hell. Aha! Blackbeard laughed hysterically with red eyes. How could he expect him to be grateful? What kind of idiotic joke was this? He had worked for Whitebeard for more than 10 years, but Whitebeard had not paid him. Wiping the blood off the corner of his mouth, Blackbeard felt relieved. Anyway, he was just bitten by a dying mad dog. There was no need to run over and bite him again. You are indebted to my father. How could you do such a shameless thing? Only animals would do such a thing. How could you do it? Surd roared with all his strength as his vitality faded away. His tone was full of hatred. In Blackbeard's ears, it was all bark and no bite. It only showed that he was more vulnerable. Why did you come here? I thought I could continue to mock you, you trash. It seems that you won't be alive to enjoy it. What a pity. Seeing that Surd had gradually closed his eyes and his vitality was severely depleted to the point where it was almost negligible, Blackbeard snorted unhappily. Just as he was about to find someone to confide in, his only audience had already died. One could imagine the depression in his heart. When I get the dark fruit, the 4 seas and the new world, I know the whole world will be mine. There were no survivors on the island. Only Blackbeard, who was waving his arms around, did not feel the slightest bit of discomfort towards the corpses around him. The killing intent that filled him fused into one and instead increased his arrogance. His entire being was emitting a thick evil aura. At the same time, the figure hiding in the dark rushed toward Blackbeard at an incredible speed. It was beyond the range of human eyes. Chapter 595. Blackbeard's body was swollen, his ugly face was full of indifference, his huge fist was raised high, and when he was about to completely solve Surd, he was shocked. Under the black night sky in front of him, a black afterimage rushed towards him. The speed was as fast as lightning, beyond human imagination. and the strange running posture had never been seen before. Is this a ghost or a human? Blackbeard's tone was surprised and uncertain. It was the first time in his life that he had seen such a strange running posture. His rough big hand subconsciously rubbed his eyes, thinking it was an illusion. When he opened his eyes again, his black pupils dilated, trying to see the ghostly figure. A strong wind suddenly blew in front of him, and the afterimage turned into reality, and a cold corpse appeared in front of him. Blackbeard didn't wake up at all. The strange figure in front of him couldn't help but be shocked. Under the perception of observation hockey, he clearly noticed that this figure was completely a dead body that had been given the ability to move. There was no breath, no heartbeat, no emotions, and the body had clear cracks similar to pottery. It was completely a zombie being used. It was the first time that Blackbeard had encountered such a scene. The lifeless zombie didn't care about Blackbeard. His feet slammed on the ground and he jumped up and instantly jumped into the sky. He clenched his fist and mercilessly greeted Blackbeard's ugly face. Looking down on me? Looking for death. Blackbeard lost his rationality and roared. His entire body shook and his fleshy skin was replaced by a shiny black color, forming an indestructible skin surface. Armament hockey hardening. With his order, his whole body turned into steel skin. Blackbeard looked contemptuously at the attacking shadow and entered the state of armament hockey. His ugly face was even more unbearable to look at. Boom. A heavy punch hit Blackbeard's old face and only pushed him back a few steps. It couldn't hurt him at all. This guy's armament hockey has reached the realm of perfection. It's really a fragile fist with this. Ouch, it hurts. Before Blackbeard could be proud, the shadow rose again, and the speed was 3 points faster than before and the strength was the same. Blackbeard's naked eye didn't even catch the trajectory of the movement and he was easily knocked away. Piff! Smelly blood spurted out from Blackbeard's mouth. The blood dyed the ground red and mixed with some indistinct particles. Looking closely, it was Blackbeard's teeth that had fallen out. Looking as far as the eye could see, Blackbeard's upper jaw had lost almost half of his teeth, and the lower jaw's teeth were nearly all gone. In the future when he ate he would probably only be able to swallow. Ah, Titch, this looks good on you? Surd suddenly opened his eyes and laughed wildly as he saw Blackbeard's miserable appearance. His face regained its redness, and his previously soft and weak voice was now full of energy. The scene of Blackbeard being brutally beaten was the best medicine for him. This was the final radiance of the setting sun, and Surd would die soon. May I know your name? Surd asked respectfully as he looked at the figure in front of him. In this world where the strong are respected, the whole world is full of respect for the strong. Although most of the reason why Blackbeard's teeth were knocked out was due to his carelessness, the fact that he could force Blackbeard to retreat again and again showed that this person was extraordinary. Turning his head, Surd's eyes were dead and emotionless. After a little thought, he gave an ambiguous answer. The name is just a simple code name. Some people used to call me Uchiha Dustless and later some people called me Roy South and now my name is Uchiha Madara. Surd was stunned, and then his face was full of doubts and puzzlement. He seemed to have heard this hoarse and slightly magnetic voice before. Where the hell did you come from, bastard? Blackbeard, who got up from the ground, was so angry that he vomited blood. He clenched his fists, and his right hand subconsciously touched his lower jaw, but there were no teeth. The dead man's face was indifferent. His emotionless eyes looked down on everything. He was wearing red armor and black gloves. His long and messy black hair danced in the wind, looking wild and unruly. It was the former invincible Uchiha Madara. Looking at the vast world, looking at thousands of years of history, I'm afraid that only Blackbeard had his teeth knocked out one after another and reached the point of leaving his name in history. Uchiha Madara's consciousness has been erased, and now the person who replaced his consciousness is naturally the one who performed the Edo Tensei. In the whole world of pirates, only one person knows the Edo Tensei. Although Madara's consciousness has been erased, and his combat power has dropped to an unprecedented freezing point, but if I replace him, even if I can't kill Blackbeard, I can give him an unforgettable lesson. Dustless's eyes flashed with a hidden light, and he said confidently, once the consciousness of a strong person who was reincarnated by the Edo Tensei is forcibly erased, his combat power will only plummet. This was the case when Orochimaru reincarnated the first Hokage. Because the consciousness of the corpse was erased, his strength was not even as good as the third Hokage, and he was finally sealed. Ninjutsu varies from person to person. Although they are all reincarnated by the Edo Tensei, Dustless is sure that he can surpass Orochimaru and Kabuto. At that time, Uchiha Madara's body was almost destroyed by Kagaya, and Dustless only kept a small number of physical cells. Therefore the current Madara is too far away from his heyday. Although his body contains Dustless's own cells, his strength is not as good as before. If the whole body was there, Dustless would have already made Uchiha Madara into Tendo. However, it is only a matter of time to restore Madara's body. Although it is difficult to create a whole body with a small number of body cells for Dustless who has reached the peak of yin-yang release, creating a new him is just around the corner. At that time, Uchiha Madara will appear in the form of Tendo. Chapter 596. Blackbeard's eyes were locked on Uchiha Madara, who was controlled by Dustless, and then he looked at the broken teeth on the ground. His ferocious face was terrifying like a ghost, and his eyeballs were about to fall out. What's with that expression? How dare a dead man look at me like I'm looking down on a bug? Blackbeard's eyes were filled with killing intent. From Uchiha Madara's indifferent eyes, he was keenly aware of the contempt in his eyes. It was one thing to be despised by Surd, but now he was despised by a dead man. Blackbeard's grievance was self-evident. His chest felt suffocated, and the flames in his heart rose. Hearing this, Uchiha Madara, who was reincarnated by Dustless, still remained indifferent. His eyes were as calm as still water, full of desolation, as if he came from another time and space, incompatible with the world in front of him. An indescribable emotion quietly spread in his mind. This fellow's boldness of looking down on the common people as ants is not a pretense. He has real strength. Putting away the contempt in his heart, Blackbeard tensed up his nerves and said vigilantly. He never felt that a person's momentum could be so terrifying. He carefully looked at Uchiha Madara, who was holding his hands in front of him, and couldn't help but stretch out a sense of insignificance. The plain indifferent eyes remained calm, and the eyes that could be calm in the face of everything were deeply moving. The ambition hidden in the depths of his eyes was enough to swallow the whole world. Suddenly he felt that the man in front of him, all living things should worship him. Bastard, where is this inexplicable oppression coming from? Blackbeard's old face was livid. Although he didn't want to admit it, but looking at Madara's eyes, he couldn't help but avoid and be full of fear. This is definitely not Haushiku's haki, but just his spirit when he was alive. Even after the fall, it is still preserved. It seems that when this guy was alive, his strength was definitely enough to be on par with that old man Whitebeard or even better. I didn't expect there to be such a person in this world. A person's temperament will never lie. Even if time has decayed and obliterated Uchiha Madara, his peerless spirit was enough to make the world look up to him. Now, everything about Uchiha Madara's past was reversed by Dustless and restarted again. He returned from hell, and the shock he brought to the world was unparalleled. Different world, different identity, but he was still the peerless Uchiha Madara. Although you are a dead man, are you interested in being my subordinate? I can bring you back from the dead, and I can forget about the matter of you knocking out all my teeth. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. Blackbeard was worthy of being a peerless hero. He abandoned his previous grievances, and instead made empty promises to Ben controlled by Dustless. At the same time, his harsh tone to tempt Madara and also warning. Bring me back to life? A dabbler like you? The corners of his mouth curled up into a playful smile, and his frozen expression loosened. His words caused Blackbeard to choke and cough. He casually said in a soft voice, Have you ever seen a divine dragon roaming the sky and a little snake crawling on the ground dancing together? Hearing this, Blackbeard's face suddenly twitched and he wanted to slap himself. It was stupid and ignorant to draw a dead man to his side. If that's the case, then die for me again. Blackbeard sneered and did not hesitate to pull out the gun from his waist and aimed at Madara's head. His cheeks flashed with cold light, and he did not hesitate to fire several shots in succession. Bang bang bang. A burst of white smoke came out of the muzzle, and then several powerful bullets burst out, aiming at Madara's head. How can this kind of old weapon hit me? Madara closed his eyes and shook his head. He easily turned his head to avoid the incoming bullets. His movements were simple and skillful, agile and at ease. His nonchalant appearance invisibly mocked Blackbeard's ignorant actions. There is one more, go to hell and die. As if he saw Madara's brain exploding, Blackbeard smiled cruelly and viciously. Naive. Madara's face was cold and his closed eyes suddenly opened. Unlike before, the scene in his pupils changed dramatically, revealing the scarlet three-tomo Sharingan. The bullet that moved extremely fast was as slow as a turtle crawling for a moment. He easily caught the bullet that was about to blow Madara's head, and then crushed it easily. This guy's eyesight can keep up with the speed of the bullet? Blackbeard swallowed his saliva and said incredulously. Predicting the trajectory of the bullet is very simple, and he can perceive it with his observation haki. But to see it with the human eye and catch it with his bare hands is a bit shocking. Is it because of those eyes? What an evil feeling. Blackbeard looked at Madara's eyes with a little panic, and said with a heavy depression. A black shadow swept out of thin air, and Blackbeard, who realized the danger of Madara's imagination, chose to make the first move. In the blink of an eye, Blackbeard appeared in front of Madara like a monster, and his iron fist covered with armament haki blasted toward him. This guy is still despicable. Dustless, who was secretly controlling Madara's consciousness, sneered again, and his scarlet eyes connected together, and the three tomo in the eye sockets were connected by a circular coil and turned into the eternal Manjikyu Sharingan. Kinsusano. The evil brilliance erupted, and the materialized chakra condensed and closed. Unlike Dustless's golden chakra, this chakra color is unique to dark blue, which is Madara's own power. Boom. Madara's fist fell on the giant skeleton, and his arm suddenly shook, and he immediately looked up at the dark blue light, and the scene reflected in his eyes was filled with blue. Insignificant, in addition to insignificant, there is only dust in the ocean not worth mentioning. Looking at Blackbeard, who was close at hand, Madara raised his eyelids indifferently and looked at him with pity. His eyes were not as indifferent as before but with sympathy, and then shook his head. It's too far, even if it's one step away, it's actually the end of the world. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.